The mail-order bride stepped off the stagecoach with bruises hidden beneath her sleeves and terror in her eyes. She'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry a stranger, running from a past that had nearly destroyed her. But when Elias Carter reached out his calloused hand in greeting, she flinched, and he saw everything. In that moment, two broken souls stood face to face in the California dust, each carrying secrets that could either save them or tear them apart forever. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The California sun beat down merciless and white on the dirt road leading into Prescott Valley. Elias Carter stood outside the general store, hat in hand, watching the stagecoach rattle toward him through waves of heat that made everything shimmer like a fever dream. His shirt stuck to his back. His heart hammered against his ribs in a way that felt ridiculous for a man of 32 who'd faced down mountain lions and broken bones without flinching. But this was different. This was a woman coming to be his wife, and he didn't know a damn thing about her except what her letters had told him. Neat handwriting, proper grammar, a Boston address. She'd answered his advertisement in the Matrimonial Gazette with careful politeness, and they'd exchanged exactly 4 letters over 3 months before he'd sent the ticket and the money. Vivian Hale. Even her name sounded like it belonged to someone who shouldn't be here, in this dusty, nowhere town at the edge of civilization. The stagecoach driver hauled on the reins, and the horses stamped and snorted, their flanks dark with sweat. Elias's neighbor, Tom Brennan, elbowed him in the ribs. "Well, go on then. Your bride's here." "Shut up, Tom. What if she's ugly? Then I'll still marry her. That was the deal." Tom laughed, but it wasn't mean. Just nervous energy. The way men got when something important was happening and they didn't know what to do with their hands. Elias put his hat back on and stepped forward as the driver climbed down and opened the coach door. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then a gloved hand appeared, gripping the doorframe so tight the leather creaked. A woman emerged into the sunlight, and Elias felt something in his chest shift sideways. She wasn't ugly. She wasn't beautiful either, not in any conventional way. She was thin, too thin, like she'd been sick or hadn't eaten enough for months. Her traveling dress was dark blue and outdated, carefully mended in places. Her face was pale despite the journey, with high cheekbones and a mouth pressed into a hard line. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen too much. She looked at him the way a cornered animal looks at a predator, calculating distance and angles of escape. Her whole body was rigid, braced for impact. "Miss Hale?" Elias took a step forward and held out his hand. "I'm Elias Carter." She flinched. It was subtle, just a slight pulling back, a tightening around her eyes. But he saw it. His hand hung in the air between them like an accusation. Slowly, carefully, he lowered it. "Welcome to Prescott Valley," he said instead, keeping his voice level and quiet, the way he talked to spooked horses. "How was your journey?" "Long." Her voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again. "It was very long, Mr. Carter." "I expect so. Boston's a far piece from here." The stagecoach driver was already hauling down her trunk, a battered leather thing that had seen better decades. It hit the ground with a thud that made her jump. Elias noticed the way her hands trembled as she smoothed down her skirts. "Is that everything?" he asked. "Yes. That's all I have." Tom Brennan stepped forward, grinning like an idiot. "Welcome to California, ma'am. I'm Tom. I own the ranch next to Carter's place. If you ever need anything—" "She'll ask me," Elias cut in, sharper than he meant to. Tom's eyebrows went up, but he backed off. Elias picked up the trunk. It was lighter than he expected. "My wagon's just here. It's about an hour's ride to the ranch." Vivian nodded, but didn't move. She stood there in the street with the dust settling around her skirts, looking at the wagon like it might bite her. "Miss Hale?" "I'm sorry." She forced herself forward, one careful step at a time. "I'm just tired." "Of course you are." He set the trunk in the wagon bed and turned to help her up onto the bench seat. She climbed up on her own before he could touch her, gripping the side rail with both hands. Elias climbed up beside her and took the reins. The horses started forward with a lurch that made Vivian grab the rail tighter. They rolled out of town in silence, past the church and the saloon and the last few houses before the land opened up into golden hills scattered with scrub oak and sage. The valley spread out before them, beautiful in its own harsh way. Elias had always loved this view, the sense of space, of possibility. But Vivian just stared straight ahead, her face blank as stone. "It's different from Boston, I imagine," he offered. "Yes. Takes some getting used to. The emptiness, I mean. Some folks never do get used to it." She didn't answer. He tried again. "The ranch isn't much to look at yet. About 300 acres, most of it grassland. I run about 40 head of cattle, some horses. There's a creek that runs year-round through the north pasture. House is small but solid. I built it myself 5 years back." "It sounds fine, Mr. Carter." Her voice was so flat, it made him feel like he was talking to himself. He fell quiet and concentrated on driving. The wagon wheels creaked. A hawk circled overhead, crying out once before wheeling away toward the hills. After a while, Vivian spoke without looking at him. "Why did you place the advertisement?" Elias considered lying, then decided against it. "Lonely, I guess. Gets quiet out here. I thought it might be good to have someone to talk to, someone to share the work with." "I see. What about you? Why'd you answer it?" Her jaw tightened. For a moment he thought she wouldn't respond at all. Then, "I needed to leave Boston. Family trouble? Something like that. The way she said it told him not to push. They lapsed back into silence. Elias found himself stealing glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. She sat perfectly straight, hands folded in her lap now, every muscle tense. There was a small scar on her left temple, barely visible beneath her hair. Her collar was buttoned all the way up despite the heat. The ranch came into view as they crested the last hill. A simple wooden house with a covered porch, a barn, a well, a few outbuildings. Nothing fancy, but he'd built every board of it with his own hands. He'd always been proud of it. Now, seeing it through her eyes, it looked small and crude and desperately alone in all that empty land. "Here we are," he said, pulling the horses to a stop in front of the house. Vivian looked at it for a long time. Then she climbed down from the wagon, still not letting him help her, and stood in the yard with her arms wrapped around herself. "It's clean inside," Elias said, feeling suddenly defensive. "I scrubbed everything down yesterday. There's food put by, firewood stacked. The roof doesn't leak. I'm sure it's fine. Let me show you." He led her up the porch steps and opened the door. The house was dim and cool after the glare outside. One main room that served as kitchen and sitting area, with a bedroom off to one side and a loft above reached by a ladder. He'd built a second bedroom last month, knowing she was coming. It had a door that latched from the inside. Vivian walked through slowly, taking it all in. She ran her hand along the kitchen table he'd made from oak, touched the curtains he'd bought in town, looked out the window at the view of the hills. When she turned back to face him, her expression was still guarded, but something had softened slightly. "You said in your letter that you built all this yourself." "Yes, ma'am. It's well made." "Thank you." She wandered to the bedroom door and looked inside at the narrow bed, the dresser, the washstand. "Is this where I'll sleep?" "If you want. Or you can have the loft, whatever you prefer." He shifted his weight, suddenly awkward. "I know we're supposed to be married, but I figure, well, we don't really know each other yet. So there's no rush on any of that. We can take our time." She turned to look at him sharply, and for the first time he saw something besides fear in her eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not going to force anything. We'll get to know each other first, do this proper." "But we're already married. The judge married us by proxy when I signed the papers in Boston." "Legally, sure, but that doesn't mean—" He trailed off, feeling heat rise in his face. "Look, I'm not that kind of man. I won't lay a hand on you unless you want me to. That's a promise." Vivian stared at him. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She looked away, blinking fast. Thank you, Mr. Carter." "Elias. You should call me Elias." "Elias." She tested the name carefully, like it might break. "And you can call me Vivian." "Vivian?" He liked the way it sounded. "Are you hungry? I could fix something. I should probably rest, if that's all right." "Of course. You take the bedroom. I'll bring your trunk in and then get out of your hair." He retrieved the trunk from the wagon and set it carefully at the foot of the bed. Vivian stood in the doorway, watching him with those haunted eyes. "Thank you," she said again. "Nothing to thank me for. This is your home now. Make yourself comfortable." He left her there and went back outside, suddenly needing air and space to think. The sun was starting to sink toward the western hills, painting everything gold and orange. He walked to the barn and leaned against the fence, watching his horses graze in the near pasture. What the hell had he gotten himself into? She was terrified of him. That much was obvious. And the way she'd flinched when he'd reached for her, the way she kept every inch of distance between them, someone had hurt her. Badly. The thought made his hands curl into fists. He'd meant what he said about taking things slow. He wasn't some brute who'd force himself on a frightened woman just because the law said she was his wife. But how was this supposed to work if she couldn't even stand to be in the same room with him? Behind him, the house door opened and closed. He turned to see Vivian standing on the porch, looking uncertain. "Elias? Yeah? Where is the necessary?" "Oh, right. Out back behind the woodshed. There's a lantern hanging by the door if you need it after dark." "Thank you." She started to turn away, then paused. "And Elias? I'm sorry for being difficult. I know this isn't what you expected." "Hey." He walked back toward the porch, stopping a respectful distance away. "You've had a long journey. You're tired and probably overwhelmed. Don't apologize for that. Still, you've been kind. I want you to know I noticed that." Something in her voice made his chest ache. "Get some rest, Vivian. We'll figure the rest out as we go." She nodded and disappeared back inside. Elias stood in the yard as the light faded, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. Cattle lowing in the distance, the horses moving through grass, the creak of the windmill turning. He'd thought a wife would make the loneliness better. Now he just felt more alone than ever with this stranger in his house, who looked at him like he might turn into a monster at any moment. That first week was strange and stilted and uncomfortable as hell. Vivian stayed in her room most of the time, only emerging for meals. Elias cooked breakfast before dawn and left it on the stove for her, then headed out to work the ranch. When he came back at midday, she'd cleaned up the morning dishes and had lunch waiting. Simple things, bread and cheese and cold meat. But she never ate with him. She'd disappear into her room while he ate, then come back out to clean up after he'd gone again. Dinners were the only meal they shared, and those were exercises in painful silence. She was a decent cook, better than he was, but she barely touched her own food, just pushed it around her plate while he tried to make conversation and failed. "Good stew," he'd offer. "Thank you. Saw a golden eagle this morning down by the creek." "That's nice." "Tom Brennan stopped by, wanted to know if we needed anything from town." That was kind of him, and that would be it. They'd sit there in the flickering lamplight, the silence growing heavier until Elias gave up and excused himself to go do evening chores. She was always careful to be in her room before he came back inside for the night. On the 5th day, he came in for lunch and found her standing at the window, looking out at the horses in the near pasture. She didn't move when he entered, just kept staring. "Something wrong?" he asked. "That bay. The one with the white blaze. He's limping." Elias looked out. Sure enough, his best gelding was favoring his front left leg. "Damn. Must have stepped on something. I'll check him after I eat." "I could do it, if you want." He turned to look at her, surprised. "You know horses?" "Some." She was still watching the gelding. "My father had a stable, before." Before what? She didn't say. But it was the most she'd volunteered about her past since arriving. "All right," Elias said carefully. "I'd appreciate that. His name's Solomon. He's usually gentle, but he doesn't like having his feet handled much." "I'll be careful." She was already heading for the door, moving with more purpose than he'd seen from her all week. Elias followed at a distance, curious despite himself. Solomon saw them coming and tossed his head, snorting. He was a big horse, 17 hands easy, with a temperament that could turn mean if you pushed him wrong. Elias had bought him 3 years back from a man who couldn't handle him, got him cheap because of it. Vivian walked right up to him like she'd known him her whole life. "Easy now," she murmured, her voice completely different than it ever was with Elias. Softer, gentler. "Let's see what you've done to yourself, She held out her hand, let Solomon sniff it. The horse's ears pricked forward. She stroked his neck, still murmuring things Elias couldn't quite hear. Then she bent down and ran her hand along his leg. Solomon stamped and shifted, but he didn't pull away. Vivian kept one hand on his shoulder, steadying him while she gently lifted his hoof. "There's your problem," she said, "stone wedged in the frog. Not deep. Hand me your knife." Elias passed it over. She worked quickly and competently, prying out the stone and checking for any infection. Solomon stood quiet as a lamb the whole time, even when she must have hit a tender spot. "All done." She patted the horse's shoulder and stepped back. "He should be fine in a day or two. Keep an eye on it for swelling." "I will." You're good with him." She shrugged, but he could see a faint flush of color in her cheeks. The first real color he'd seen there since she'd arrived. "I used to help in my father's stable. It was the one thing I was good at." "What happened to it?" "The stable." Her face shuddered immediately. "It's gone now. Everything's gone." She handed back his knife and walked quickly toward the house, arms wrapped around herself again. Elias watched her go, watched Solomon nudge at her shoulder as she passed. The horse had never done that with anyone before. That night at dinner, he tried again. "You really have a gift with horses." "It's not a gift, just practice." Solomon doesn't let anyone touch his feet. Usually takes 2 men to hold him down for the farrier. Vivian cut her meat into smaller and smaller pieces without eating any of it. Horses are easier than people. They're honest about what they want. "What do you mean?" She looked up at him, and for a moment something raw showed through. "You always know where you stand with a horse. If they're going to hurt you, they don't pretend otherwise first." The words hung in the air between them. Elias put down his fork. "Vivian, who hurt you?" "I don't want to talk about it." "I'm not going to hurt you. You know that, right? You keep saying that." Her voice was tight. "But every man says that at first." "I'm not every man. How am I supposed to know that?" The question came out sharp, almost desperate. "I've known you less than a week. You're bigger than me, stronger than me. This is your house, your land. Legally, I'm your property. You could do anything you wanted, and no one would stop you." Elias felt like he'd been punched. "I wouldn't. Jesus, Vivian, I wouldn't." "But you could. So could you. You could poison my food or brain me with a skillet while I sleep, or set the house on fire. Should I be afraid of you?" "That's different." "Why? Because I'm a man?" "Yes!" She stood up so fast her chair tipped backward. Tears streaked her face, but her expression was furious. "You have no idea what it's like. None. To spend every day knowing that if someone decides to hurt you, really hurt you, there's nothing you can do to stop them. To have to smile and be polite and grateful while your whole body is screaming at you to run." "Then run," Elias said quietly. "If that's what you need to do, I won't stop you." She stared at him. "What?" "I mean it. There's money in the tin on the top shelf, about $40. Take it. Take the wagon if you want. Go back to town. Get on the next stage to wherever you want to go. I won't come after you." "You just let me leave." "I'd rather have you here. I'd rather we could make this work. But I'm not going to keep you prisoner, Vivian. You're a person, not property. If you want to go, go." She stood frozen, breathing hard. Then she sat back down heavily, like her legs had given out. "I don't have anywhere else to go," she whispered. "That's the hell of it. There's nowhere else to go." "Then stay. But stay because you want to, not because you're trapped." "I don't know what I want anymore." Elias reached across the table, slowly enough that she could pull back if she wanted to. He laid his hand palm up on the wood between them. "How about this? Every morning you decide, stay or go. If you're still here when I come in for breakfast, I'll know you chose to stay that day. And we'll take it one day at a time until you feel sure." Vivian looked at his hand like it might bite her, but after a long moment, she reached out and briefly, barely, touched her fingers to his palm. "One day at a time," she repeated. "One day at a time." She pulled her hand back, but something had shifted in her face. Not trust. Not yet. But maybe the smallest beginning of it. They finished dinner in silence, but it was a different kind of silence than before. Less hostile. Less afraid. When Vivian stood to clear the plates, Elias stood too and started helping. She looked surprised, but didn't object. They washed dishes side by side, not talking, just sharing the work. Her shoulder nearly touched his once, and she didn't flinch away. It wasn't much, but it was something. Neat. The next morning, when Elias came in for breakfast, she was there, setting out plates. Her hands were steady. "Good morning," she said. "Morning." He hung his hat on the peg by the door. "You stayed." "One more day." But there was the ghost of something that might have been a smile at the corner of her mouth. They ate together. She actually ate this time, not much, but something. And when he asked about her father's stable in Boston, she answered with more than 3 words. It was on Commercial Street near the wharves, 22 stalls. We boarded horses for the merchant ship's captains, mostly. My father he was good with them, patient. He taught me everything. Sounds like a good man. Her face darkened. He was, until he wasn't. She didn't elaborate, and Elias didn't push. But she'd given him a piece of her past, small as it was. He'd take it. Over the next few days, they fell into a rhythm. Elias did the heavy ranch work, mending fences, moving cattle, clearing irrigation ditches. Vivian took over the cooking and cleaning, but she also started spending time with the horses. He'd come back midday and find her in the corral with one or another of them, just standing quiet, letting them get used to her. Solomon followed her around like a dog. "Never seen anything like it," Tom Brennan said one afternoon, leaning on the fence to watch. "That horse tried to kill the last man who worked him." "She's got a way about her," Elias agreed. "You're a lucky man, Carter." Elias didn't feel lucky exactly. Vivian still slept behind a latched door. She still went rigid if he moved too fast or spoke too loud. But she was staying. Every morning she was there, and every morning felt like a small miracle. 2 weeks after she'd arrived, he came back from checking the north fence line and found her in the barn with his worst horse, a half-broke Mustang mare named Delilah, who'd put 3 men in the dirt and sent one to the doctor with a cracked rib. "Vivian, get out of there," he called, his heart jumping into his throat. "She's fine." "She's dangerous. She'll kick your head in." "No, she won't." Vivian had her hand on the mare's neck. Delilah's ears were forward, her eyes soft. "She's just afraid. Someone hurt her badly before you got her." "How do you know that?" "Look at the scars on her flanks. Those are spur marks, deep ones, and the way she flinches from a raised hand. Someone beat her." Elias climbed the fence rails to look closer. She was right. He'd never noticed before, too focused on just trying to survive working with the mare. "So what do we do?" he asked. "We give her time, patience. Let her learn that not all hands hurt." "Sounds familiar," he said without thinking. Vivian glanced at him, and their eyes met. For a moment, something passed between them, an understanding, maybe, an acknowledgement of all the things neither of them had said. "Yeah," she said softly. "I guess it does." 3 weeks in, Elias woke before dawn to the sound of screaming. He was out of bed and across the house in seconds, his heart hammering. Vivian's door was closed, but not latched. He shoved it open to find her thrashing in bed, caught in a nightmare, making sounds that didn't seem human. "Vivian! Vivian, wake up!" He caught her flailing wrist and her eyes flew open. For a second, she didn't recognize him. She jerked back, scrambling to get away, her breath coming in harsh gasps. "It's me. It's Elias. You're safe. You're at the ranch." Recognition filtered back into her face. She pressed both hands to her mouth, tears streaming. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Hey, no, don't be sorry." He backed up, giving her space. "Bad dream?" She nodded, still shaking. Her nightgown was soaked with sweat. "You want to talk about it?" "No." "Okay, can I get you anything? Water?" Just go, please." It killed him to leave her like that. But he did. He went back to his own room and lay in bed, listening to her cry through the thin wall between them. Soft, broken sounds that she was trying to muffle with her pillow. In the morning, she didn't come out for breakfast. Elias worked through the morning in a black mood, angry at whoever had put that terror in her, angry at himself for not knowing how to help. When he came back at midday, she was in the kitchen making bread. Her eyes were red and swollen. "I'm sorry about last night," she said without looking at him. "Stop apologizing. I woke you up." "I don't care about that." He sat down at the table. "Vivian, look at me." She did, reluctantly. "Whatever happened to you, it's not your fault. You know that, right?" You don't know what happened. So tell me, why? So you can feel sorry for me? Or worse, decide I'm too broken to be worth the trouble? Neither. So I can understand, so I can help. You can't help. Her voice cracked. Nobody can help. What's done is done. Maybe. But you're still having nightmares. You're still scared. That means it's not done. Not really. She kneaded the bread dough with more force than necessary, her knuckles white. My father sold me. The words came out flat and hard. Elias felt his stomach drop. After my mother died, he started drinking. Lost the stable. Lost everything. He had debts. So he sold me to a man named Richard Thornton to clear them. Thornton was 53 years old and already had 2 wives who'd died under mysterious circumstances. But he had money, and that was all my father cared about. Jesus, Vivian. I was 18. I tried to refuse, but it didn't matter. My father forged my signature on the marriage documents. Thornton, She stopped, her breathing ragged. It doesn't matter what he did. What matters is that after 2 years, he died. Heart attack in his sleep. And suddenly I was free. You ran. As fast as I could. I took what money I could find and left Boston the same day. When I saw your advertisement, I thought... She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. I thought anywhere had to be better than there, even marrying another stranger. But I might have been just like him. Yes. And when I got here and saw how isolated it was, how far from anyone, I thought I'd made the worst mistake of my life. She finally looked up at him, her eyes fierce and wet. But you weren't like him. You aren't, and I don't know what to do with that. Elias stood slowly and moved toward her, telegraphing every movement. She tensed, but didn't back away. He stopped a foot from her, close enough that she could see his face clearly in the dim kitchen light. I'm going to make you a promise, he said, and I need you to believe me when I say it. What promise? No one will ever hurt you again while I'm alive. I don't care who they are or what they think they have a right to. They'll have to go through me first, and I won't go down easy. Elias, I mean it, Vivian. You're under my protection now. That means something. A tear rolled down her cheek. Why are you being so kind to me? Because you deserve kindness. Because everyone does. And because... He hesitated, then pushed forward. Because I'm starting to care about you. More than I probably should, given the circumstances. She sucked in a breath. For a long moment they just stood there, the bread dough forgotten on the table between them. Then, slowly, carefully, Vivian reached out and took his hand. Her grip was tight and trembling, but she held on. One day at a time? She whispered. One day at a time, he agreed. She didn't let go. That afternoon, Vivian didn't pull her hand away for nearly a minute. When she finally did, her fingers lingered against his palm like she was testing whether letting go would hurt. Then she returned to her bread dough, working it with hands that shook less than before. Elias went back outside, but something had fundamentally changed. The air felt different. The weight he'd been carrying since she arrived had shifted, not gone, but redistributed in a way that made breathing easier. The next morning she was waiting for him at breakfast again, but this time when their eyes met across the table, she didn't look away. Spring pushed into early summer, the grass turned golden brown and the creek ran lower. Elias spent long days moving cattle to better pasture, repairing fence line that the winter storms had torn apart. Vivian kept the house, tended a small vegetable garden she'd started behind the barn, and spent every spare moment with the horses, especially Delilah. The Mustang mare had become her project. Every day Vivian would stand in the corral with her, sometimes for an hour or more, just existing in the same space, not asking for anything, not demanding, just being. You're wasting time, Tom Brennan said one afternoon, watching from the fence. That horse is broke wrong. You'll never fix her. She's not broken, Vivian said without turning around. She's traumatized. There's a difference. Semantics. No, it's not. She glanced at him, her expression harder than Elias had seen it before. Broken means unfixable. Traumatized means you need time and patience. Everyone deserves that chance. Tom opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked at Elias with raised eyebrows. Elias just shrugged. After Tom left, Vivian stayed in the corral until sunset. Elias watched from the barn while he mucked out stalls, fascinated despite himself. She moved around Delilah in slow circles, never pushing into the mare's space, never forcing contact, just patient, steady, present. Finally, as the light turned orange and long, Delilah took 3 steps toward Vivian and lowered her head. Vivian went completely still. Then, moving like she was underwater, she raised one hand and touched the mare's forehead. Delilah leaned into the touch. Elias felt something catch in his throat. He'd owned that horse for 8 months and never once gotten her to willingly approach. Now here was Vivian, who'd been on the ranch less than 2 months, and the mare was practically asking for affection. That night at dinner, he brought it up. "You did something incredible today." Vivian paused with her fork halfway to her mouth. "With Delilah?" "She came to you, on her own." "It's not that incredible. She's been watching me for weeks. She decided I was safe, that's all." "That's everything, though, with a horse like that." He leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You really do have a gift, Vivian. I've never seen anything like it." She flushed and looked down at her plate. "It's just practice." "It's more than that. I've been around horses my whole life, and I can't do what you do. You're too impatient." "Excuse me?" She looked up, and there was the faintest hint of a smile on her lips. "With the horses, you want them to trust you right away. You push too hard." "I do not." "You do. I've watched you. You get frustrated when they don't respond fast enough, and they feel that. They feed off it." Elias opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. She was right. He knew she was right. "Fine. So teach me." "Teach you what?" "Whatever it is you do. The patience thing. I could stand to learn it." Vivian set down her fork, her expression turning serious. "It's not something you can teach exactly. It's about emptying yourself out, not bringing your frustration or your expectations into the space with them, just being neutral." "How do you do that?" She was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. "You find the quiet place inside yourself where nothing can touch you, where you're safe, and you live there while you're with them. They sense it. They know you're not going to hurt them because you're not carrying anything sharp." "The quiet place," Elias repeated. "You mean like meditation?" "I guess. I never called it that." She looked out the window at the darkening hills. "When I was with Thornton, I had to find somewhere in my head where he couldn't reach, somewhere he couldn't damage. The horses can sense that space. They trust it." The casual way she said it made Elias's chest ache. She'd built a fortress inside herself just to survive, and now she was using it to heal broken animals. There was something both beautiful and devastating about that. "Will you show me?" he asked. "Tomorrow. I want to learn." She studied his face for a long moment, like she was trying to determine if he was serious. Then she nodded. "All right, but you have to actually listen, not just wait for your turn to talk." "I can do that." "We'll see." The next morning, Vivian led him to the corral where Delilah stood in the far corner, watching them with suspicious eyes. The mare's ears flicked back and forth, tracking their movements. "First rule," Vivian said quietly. "Stop thinking about what you want from her. She doesn't care what you want. She only cares whether you're a threat." "I'm not a threat." "Your body language says differently. Look at how you're standing." Elias looked down at himself. He was squared up, shoulders back, taking up space. The same way he'd face down another man if he needed to establish dominance. "You're making yourself big," Vivian continued. "Intimidating. A horse reads that as aggression. Make yourself smaller. Turn your shoulder away. Show her your side, not your front." He adjusted his stance, feeling awkward and exposed. Vivian moved beside him, and he caught the faint scent of the lavender soap she'd started making from the plants she'd found growing wild near the creek. "Better," she said. "Now breathe. Long and slow. Let everything else go. Your to-do list for today. The fence that needs mending. Whatever Tom said yesterday that annoyed you. All of it. Just breathe and be here." "That's it?" "That's everything." They stood there at the morning sun, not moving, barely breathing. Elias tried to empty his mind the way she'd described, but thoughts kept crowding in. The irrigation ditch that needed clearing, the supply run to town he'd been putting off, whether they had enough hay put by for winter. "You're still thinking," Vivian murmured. "I can feel it from here. The horses definitely can." "I don't know how to just stop thinking." "Then think about something that makes you quiet inside. Something peaceful." Elias closed his eyes and tried. What made him peaceful? Not much, honestly. Work made him tired. Town made him irritable. The only thing that had given him any sense of peace lately was... He opened his eyes and found himself looking at Vivian. She was watching Delilah with complete focus, her face relaxed in a way it rarely was inside the house. Out here with the horses, she was different, unguarded, whole. Something in his chest settled. Delilah took a step toward them. Don't react, Vivian whispered. Stay exactly as you are. The mare took another step, then another. Her nostrils flared, reading the air. She stopped about 6 feet away, close enough that Elias could see the old spur scars on her flanks clearly. They stood frozen. Minutes passed. Elias's back started to ache from holding the position, but he didn't move. Beside him, Vivian was perfectly still, barely breathing. Finally, Delilah closed the distance. She stretched out her neck and sniffed Elias's shoulder, then Vivian's. Her breath was hot and grassy. Then she turned and walked calmly to the water trough, no longer concerned with them at all. That's the best she's ever been with anyone except you, Elias said quietly. That's because you actually managed to be calm for once. Vivian smiled at him, a real smile that reached her eyes. See? You can learn. Something warm uncurled in Elias's stomach. Maybe I just needed the right teacher. She ducked her head, but the smile stayed. They walked back to the house together, and when her hand accidentally brushed his, she didn't pull away. Over the following weeks, they fell into a new rhythm. Mornings, Elias would work the ranch, while Vivian handled the house and garden. Afternoons, they'd spend an hour or two in the corral together, working with the horses. She taught him to read their body language, to understand what a pinned ear meant versus a curious one, how to tell the difference between fear and aggression. Horses are honest, she told him one sweltering afternoon. They don't lie about how they feel. If they're scared, they show it. If they're angry, you'll know. People should be more like that. You want people to kick and bite when they're upset? She laughed, an actual laugh, light and surprised. You know what I mean. I do. He leaned against the fence, watching her work a young gelding on a lid line. You're different out here, with them. Different how? Happier. More yourself, I think. She was quiet for a moment, guiding the gelding through a turn. I spent 2 years being whatever Thornton wanted me to be. Quiet when he wanted quiet. Decorative when he wanted decoration. Invisible when he wanted me gone. I forgot how to be anything else. She glanced at him. The horses don't want me to be anything except present. It's a relief. You don't have to be anything except yourself with me either. You know that, right? I'm starting to. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even quite trust yet, but it was closer than they'd been before. That evening, a violent thunderstorm rolled over the valley. The sky turned green-black and the wind picked up until it screamed around the corners of the house. Rain came in sheets, pounding the roof like fists. Elias was checking the windows when he heard the horses screaming in the barn. He ran outside into the deluge, Vivian right behind him. In the barn, the horses were losing their minds, kicking at their stalls, eyes rolling white with terror. Thunder cracked directly overhead, so loud it felt like the sky splitting open. It's the wind, Vivian shouted over the noise. They can't tell what direction it's coming from. It's confusing them. Solomon reared in his stall, nearly braining himself on the low beam. The gelding Vivian had been working kicked his door so hard the wood cracked. We need to move them to the far pasture, Elias yelled. They'll hurt themselves in here. In this storm, they'll scatter to hell and back. Better than dying in a collapsed barn. Another crack of thunder. One of the younger mares went down, thrashing. Vivian was already moving toward her stall. Get the others, she called back. I've got her. Elias threw open stall doors, trying to herd the panicked horses toward the barn entrance. They fought him, wheeling and rearing. One caught him in the shoulder with a hoof and sent him sprawling into the dirt. He got back up, tasting blood, and kept pushing. Behind him, he could hear Vivian's voice, low and steady even through the chaos. He couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. That same calm she always brought to the corral. The young mare stopped thrashing. Elias got 3 horses out before he looked back. Vivian was in the stall with the mare now, kneeling in the straw, one hand on the horse's neck. The mare was on her side, breathing hard but no longer fighting. Vivian, we need to move. I know. Give me a second. We don't have a second. The roof could go any minute. She ignored him, focused entirely on the mare. Her lips were moving. Whatever she was saying, it was working. The mare's breathing slowed. Her eyes stopped rolling. Then Vivian stood slowly and backed toward the stall door, making soft clicking sounds with her tongue. The mare heaved herself to her feet and followed. How the hell did you do that? Elias demanded. She was more scared of being alone than she was of the storm. I just gave her something to focus on besides her fear. They got the rest of the horses out and into the far pasture, where the open space gave them room to run off their panic. By the time they made it back to the house, they were both soaked through and shaking. Elias's shoulder throbbed where the hoof had caught him. Inside, Vivian immediately went for towels and the medical kit. Sit down. Let me see that shoulder. It's fine. You're bleeding through your shirt. Sit down. He sat. She carefully unbuttoned his shirt and peeled it away from the wound. The skin was split in a 3-inch gash, not deep, but messy. She cleaned it with whiskey that burned like hellfire, then wrapped it tight. You're getting good at this, he said through gritted teeth. I had a lot of practice with Thornton. He liked to hunt, always coming back with injuries. Her hands were steady on the bandage. Hold still. When she finished, she didn't move away. They sat there in the lamplight with the storm still raging outside, her hands resting on his bare shoulder, his shirt hanging open. You could have been killed out there, she said quietly. So could you. I was trying to save a horse. You were trying to save me. I was trying to save all of you. She met his eyes. Thank you. For what? For running into a collapsing barn in a thunderstorm. For not ordering me to stay inside where it was safe. For trusting that I knew what I was doing. You did know what you were doing. That thing you did with the mare, Vivian, that was incredible. She shook her head. Any good horsewoman could have done it. No, they couldn't. I've seen good horsewomen. You're something else entirely. A faint blush crept up her neck. Don't say it's just practice. It's not. It's a gift, and you need to stop pretending it's nothing. She started to pull away, but he caught her wrist gently. She froze, and he could feel her pulse hammering against his fingers. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I shouldn't have grabbed you. But she didn't pull away. Instead, she looked down at where his hand circled her wrist, her expression unreadable. You have good hands, she said finally. Strong but careful. The horses trust them, I've noticed. Do you? The question hung between them. Outside, the storm was beginning to ease, the thunder moving off to the east. I'm starting to, she whispered. She turned her wrist in his grip until their palms met. Her hand was small in his, calloused from work, still trembling slightly. They stayed like that, hands clasped, while the rain drummed softer and softer on the roof. Vivian. Yeah? I need you to know something. She waited, not pulling away. This ranch is failing, he said. I've been trying to keep it together on my own, but I'm losing ground. The cattle prices have dropped. Half my calves died last winter. I'm barely breaking even most months. By this time next year, I might not have anything left. Why are you telling me this? Because you should know what you're signing up for if you stay. This isn't some prosperous spread. It's a struggling operation run by a man who's in over his head. And if you wanted to leave before things get worse, I'd understand. She was quiet for a long time. Then, what if we didn't focus on cattle? What? The cattle aren't working. You just said so. But the horses... She looked up at him with something bright and fierce in her eyes. Elias, what we did today with that mare, people would pay for that. Good money. There are horses all over this territory that need gentling, need training, need someone who understands them. We could do that. Horse training? Why not? You have the land. I have the skill. Tom Brennan told me last week that he knows 3 ranchers who have problem horses they're ready to shoot because they can't do anything with them. What if we took those horses instead, trained them and sold them, or charged for the training? Elias stared at her. The idea was crazy. Horse training was hard, uncertain work. But looking at her face, seeing the excitement there for the first time since she'd arrived, he found himself nodding. All right, let's try it. Really? Really, but you'll have to be the one doing most of the training. I'm not half as good as you are. Then I'll teach you to be better. She squeezed his hand. We'll do it together. Together, he echoed. They sat there in the lamplight, hands still clasped, the storm finally breaking apart above them. And for the first time since Vivian had stepped off that stagecoach, Elias felt something that might have been hope. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the air scrubbed clean by the storm. Elias rode into town and put out the word. Elias Carter and his wife were taking in problem horses for training. Reasonable rates, results guaranteed or your money back. Tom Brennan was the first to show up 3 days later, leading a big buckskin stallion that tried to bite him twice on the way up the drive. "This is Samson," Tom said, keeping a safe distance from the horse's teeth. "Mean as a rattlesnake and twice as quick. Threw my best hand last month and broke his collarbone. I was going to sell him for glue, but my wife said I should give you folks a chance first." Vivian walked a slow circle around the stallion, reading him. Samson pinned his ears and showed his teeth, but she didn't react. "How long have you had him?" she asked. 2 years. He was fine the first 6 months. Then something changed. Got aggressive. "Did anything happen around that time? An injury, a new handler, anything different?" Tom frowned, thinking. "Well, my old foreman left and I hired a new one, Mexican fellow, good with a rope, but Samson never took to him." "This new foreman, did he use spurs?" "Sure, everyone does." Vivian pointed to marks on the stallion's flanks. "These are fresh. Less than a month old. Your foreman's been jabbing him hard enough to break skin. That's why he's aggressive. He's defending himself." Tom's face darkened. "That son of a... I'll fire him today." "Don't bother. Just keep him away from the horses. Samson will settle once he knows he's safe." She looked at Elias. "What do you think? 3 weeks?" "If anyone can do it, you can." They took Samson. A week later, a rancher from 2 valleys over brought a mare who wouldn't let anyone ride her. The week after that, a spooked gelding who'd been in a barn fire and couldn't stand being enclosed. Word spread. By the end of summer, they had 6 horses in training and a waiting list. The work was hard and slow and sometimes dangerous. Vivian took a kick to the ribs that left her bruised for a month. Elias got his hand stepped on and lost a fingernail. But they kept at it, and slowly, impossibly, the horses changed. The buckskin stallion learned to trust again. The mare who wouldn't be ridden let Vivian on her back after 2 weeks of patient groundwork. The gelding from the barn fire spent an hour in a closed stall without panicking. People started calling Vivian the Horse Whisperer. She hated the name. "It makes it sound like magic," she complained one evening. "It's not magic, it's just paying attention." "Let them call it whatever they want," Elias said, "as long as they keep paying." Because they were paying. Good money, enough that Elias could start putting some aside for winter. Enough to repair the barn roof properly and buy supplies they'd been doing without. The ranch was turning around. And so was Vivian. She stood straighter now, spoke louder, looked people in the eye when they came to pick up their horses. She smiled more, laughed easier. The haunted look that had lived in her eyes since Boston was fading, replaced by something brighter. One evening in late August, Elias came back from town to find her in the corral, with all 6 training horses loose around her. They followed her like a herd, moving when she moved, stopping when she stopped. It was the damnedest thing he'd ever seen. "How are you doing that?" he called from the fence. "I'm not doing anything. They're just choosing to follow." "Vivian, that's not normal." She laughed and spun in a circle, her skirts kicking up dust. The horses spun with her. "I know. Isn't it wonderful?" She was radiant, absolutely radiant, and Elias realized with sudden, perfect clarity that he was in love with her. Not the careful, hopeful affection he'd been nursing since she arrived. Not the partnership and respect they'd built. Real, deep, no-going-back love that hit him like a fist to the sternum. He must have made some sound because she looked over at him, her smile fading. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Nothing's wrong." He climbed the fence and dropped into the corral. The horses shifted but didn't spook. "I just realized something, that's all." "What?" He walked toward her, slow and steady like she'd taught him. She watched him come, curious but not afraid. When he was close enough to touch, he stopped. "I love you," he said. Her eyes went wide. "Elias, I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take things slow, but I need you to know. You don't have to say it back. You don't have to do anything with it. I just needed to tell you." She stood frozen, her chest rising and falling fast. Around them, the horses had gone still, sensing the shift in energy. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "After Thornton, I don't know if I have that left in me." "That's okay." "Is it?" "Because you deserve someone who can love you back properly. Someone who isn't broken." "You're not broken." "I have nightmares every night. I flinch when doors slam. I can't stand to be touched without warning. How is that not broken?" He took one careful step closer. "You survived something that should have destroyed you. You took that survival and turned it into this." He gestured at the horses, at the ranch around them. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Vivian. That's not broken. That's extraordinary." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You don't understand what you're asking for." "Then help me understand." She wrapped her arms around herself, that old defensive gesture he hadn't seen in weeks. "What if I can't ever be a real wife to you? What if I can never? What if the thought of it always makes me feel sick? Then we figure it out together. We've been doing that all along, haven't we?" "This is different." "Is it?" He held out his hand, palm up. "An offering, not a demand. One day at a time, that's what we said, one day at a time until you feel sure." She looked at his hand for a long moment, then slowly she reached out and took it. "I'm not sure," she said, "about any of this, about what I feel or what I can give you, but I want to try. Is that enough?" "It's everything," Elias said. He pulled her close, telegraphing the movement so she could stop him if she wanted. She didn't. She came into his arms and pressed her face against his chest, and he held her while she cried. Not the broken, desperate sobs he'd heard through the wall that first month. These were different, cleaner, like something toxic was working its way out. The horses pressed close around them, forming a living circle. Patient, protective, present. And in that moment, standing in the dust with the woman he loved and the horses they'd healed together, Elias felt like maybe, just maybe, they were going to be all right. The days after that confession in the corral were strange and careful. Vivian didn't pull away from him, but she didn't exactly move closer either. They existed in a kind of limbo, partners in the work but uncertain about everything else. Elias didn't push. He'd meant what he said about taking things one day at a time, even if it killed him to sleep alone every night knowing she was just a thin wall away. The horse training business kept growing. By September, they had a full roster and had to start turning people away. Vivian worked from dawn until well past dark, pouring everything she had into the horses. Elias watched her transform a vicious paint gelding into a gentle mount in 3 weeks flat, watched her teach a traumatized mare to trust human hands again, watched her do things with animals that shouldn't have been possible. But he also watched her avoid him. Not obviously. She still cooked meals, still worked beside him when the ranch demanded it. But the easiness they'd built over the summer had fractured. She was skittish again, jumping when he entered a room unexpectedly, finding reasons to be in the barn when he was in the house. It came to a head on a cold night in early October. Elias had been repairing tack in the barn when he heard her scream. Not the nightmare screams he'd learned to recognize, but something worse. Raw terror, immediate and real. He ran. She was in Solomon's stall, backed against the wall, staring at something in the corner. The big gelding was pressed against the far side, snorting nervously. "Vivian, what—" "Snake," she choked out. "There's a snake." He saw it then, coiled in the straw near the water bucket. A rattler, maybe 4 feet long, its tail buzzing like death. "Don't move," he said quietly. "I'm not planning on it." He grabbed a shovel from the wall and moved slowly into the stall. The snake's head tracked him, tongue flicking. Solomon stomped and tossed his head, making the whole situation more dangerous. "Easy, boy," Vivian murmured, somehow finding her calm voice even terrified. "Easy now." The horse settled slightly. Elias raised the shovel and brought it down hard, severing the snake's head from its body. The tail kept rattling for a few seconds after, a horrible sound in the quiet barn. Vivian slid down the wall and sat hard in the straw, shaking. "You all right?" Elias tossed the dead snake out of the stall and crouched beside her. "I hate snakes," she said, her voice thin. "Thornton used to—" He collected them, kept them in glass cases in his study. He'd take them out sometimes, let them loose in our bedroom while I was sleeping. Thought it was funny to watch me wake up screaming. Elias felt something dark and violent rise in his chest. "That's sick." That was the least of what he did. She looked up at him, her face pale. I never told you the worst of it. I couldn't, but you should know. You deserve to know what you're dealing with. Vivian, he liked to hurt me, she said flatly. Not just physically, though there was plenty of that. He liked to humiliate me, make me feel small and worthless and afraid. He'd invite his friends over and make me serve them dinner while he told stories about how stupid I was, how clumsy, how lucky I was that he'd married me because no one else would have me. And I'd have to stand there and smile and pretend it didn't matter. Her hands were fisted in her skirts, knuckles white. The nights were worse. He'd do things, hurt me in ways I didn't know a person could be hurt. And if I cried or fought back, he'd lock me in the basement with his snakes for days. No food, no water, just me in the dark and the sound of them moving in their cages. Elias's vision had gone red around the edges. How long? 2 years, 730 days. I counted every single one. And your father, he knew? She laughed bitterly. My father sold me to him knowing exactly what kind of man Thornton was. His first 2 wives didn't die of illness. Everyone knew that. But Thornton had money and my father had debts, and I was just a commodity to settle the accounts. I'm going to be sick, Elias said. Don't. I need to finish this. She took a shaky breath. When Thornton died, I didn't feel relief. I felt terrified. Because I'd spent so long being what he made me that I didn't know how to be anything else. I didn't know if there was anything left of me underneath all that fear. But you got out. You came here. I ran. There's a difference. She finally met his eyes. And when I got here and you were kind to me, I didn't trust it. I kept waiting for you to show your real face, to turn into him. Because in my experience, all men eventually do. I'm not him. I know that now, and in my head I know it, but my body doesn't believe it yet. When you get too close, when you move too fast, some part of me still thinks I'm back in that house with him. And I hate it. I hate that he still has that power over me. Elias sat down beside her in the straw, careful to leave space between them. That's not weakness, Vivian. That's survival instinct. Your body's trying to protect you. From you. From someone who's never done anything but help me. How is that fair? It's not. But trauma doesn't care about fair. They sat in silence for a while. Solomon had calmed and was nosing at his hay, unconcerned now that the threat was gone. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the barn doors. I do care about you, Vivian said finally. I need you to know that. What I feel for you is real. I just don't know if I can ever be what you need. What do you think I need? A real wife. Someone who can share your bed without having a panic attack. Someone who can give you children and a normal life. I don't want normal. I want you. You say that now, but what about in a year, 5 years? What if I never get better? Elias turned to look at her fully. Then we figure it out. We adapt. There's more than one way to build a life together, Vivian. We don't have to follow anyone else's rules about how it's supposed to look. But children, maybe we'll have them, maybe we won't. There's plenty of kids who need homes. We could take in orphans if we wanted, or we could just focus on the horses and each other. I don't care which. I just care about you. She stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. How can you be so patient with me? How can you be so patient with those horses? It's the same thing. You wait because they're worth waiting for. Tears spilled over, tracking through the dust on her cheeks. I'm so tired of being afraid. I know you are. I want to be brave. I want to be the person who can stand in a corral with 6 wild horses and feel safe. But the second you touch me, I turn back into that girl in the basement. What if we started smaller? Elias said carefully. Not everything at once, just small things. On your terms. At your pace. Like what? Like this. He held out his hand, palm up. The same gesture he'd made 100 times with her. You don't have to take it, but if you want to, it's here. Vivian looked at his hand. Then, slowly, she reached out and laced her fingers through his. Good, he said softly. That's good. How does that feel? Scary, but not bad scary. Just new scary. New is okay. We can work with new. They sat there holding hands in the straw while the wind howled outside and Solomon munched his hay. It wasn't romance. It wasn't passion, but it was connection, real and honest and chosen, and that mattered more than anything else. Can we try something? Vivian asked after a while. Anything. Can you put your arm around my shoulders? Just for a minute. I want to see if I can stand it. Elias moved carefully, telegraphing everything. He lifted his arm and settled it gently across her shoulders, barely touching. She went rigid immediately, her breathing shallow. You're doing great, he murmured. Just breathe. I've got you. I know. I know you've got me. That's what makes it different. She leaned into him slightly, testing. Her whole body was tense as wire. With him, being held meant being trapped, but this doesn't feel like a trap. It's not. You can move away anytime you want. I know. She took a deep breath and leaned a little more. That's why I don't want to. They stayed like that until her breathing evened out and some of the tension left her frame. Then she pulled back and he let her go immediately. Thank you, she said. For what? For not making me feel broken for needing to go slow. You're not broken, Vivian. You're healing. There's a difference. She smiled, small and fragile, but real. You sound like me talking about the horses. I learned from the best. They stood up, brushing straw from their clothes. Vivian looked at the corner where the snake had been, shuddered, then squared her shoulders. I should check the rest of the stalls. Make sure there aren't any more. I'll help. They worked through the barn together, checking every corner and crevice. No more snakes, just mice and the usual barn spiders. When they finished, the moon was high and bright, turning everything silver. Walking back to the house, Vivian reached for his hand again. This time she didn't let go until they reached the porch. Elias? Yeah? I think I'd like to sleep in the main room tonight. Not the bedroom, just I don't want to be alone right now. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. All right. I can take the bedroom. You take... No, I mean together. You on the sofa, me in the chair, close enough to know someone's there, but not too close. If that's what you want. It is. So they arranged themselves in the main room, him stretched out on the old sofa he'd built their first year. Her curled in the armchair with a quilt wrapped around her shoulders. The lamp burned low between them. Tell me something, Vivian said into the darkness. Something about you I don't know yet. Elias thought for a moment. My mother died when I was 12. Fever took her in 3 days. My father raised me and my sister alone after that. You have a sister? Had. She died in childbirth 5 years ago, her and the baby both. That's when I left Missouri and came out here. Couldn't stand to be in that house anymore with all the ghosts. I'm sorry. Me too. She would have liked you, I think. She was tough like you. Didn't take grief from anyone. He shifted on the sofa, finding a position that didn't make his bad shoulder ache. What about you? Any siblings? A brother, younger, Thomas. Her voice went soft. He was 10 when I married Thornton. Tried to stop the wedding, actually. Punched Thornton right in the face in front of everyone. Smart kid. Thornton had him sent away to boarding school as punishment. I never saw him again. Don't even know if he's still alive. You could try to find him. Write letters. Hire someone to search. Maybe. She pulled the quilt tighter. Or maybe some doors are better left closed. He's probably better off thinking I'm dead than knowing I'm out here, still damaged from what happened. You're not damaged, and he's your brother. I'd bet money he'd want to know you're all right. She was quiet for a long time, then, maybe someday, when I feel more like myself again, if that ever happens. It will. You sound so sure. I am sure. I've watched you bring back horses everyone else had given up on. If you can do that for them, you can do it for yourself. That's different. Is it? She didn't answer, but he could see her thinking about it in the lamplight, turning it over in her mind like a stone. They fell asleep like that, her in the chair and him on the sofa, close enough to hear each other breathing, but not touching. When Elias woke in the gray pre-dawn, Vivian was still there, her face peaceful in sleep for once. He lay still and watched her, this woman who'd survived hell and come out the other side still fighting, who'd taken his failing ranch and turned it into something worth keeping, who'd taught him patience and shown him what real strength looked like. He loved her so much it physically hurt. The arrangement became routine. Most nights Vivian would sleep in her room, but when the nightmares got bad or the memories pressed too close, she'd come out to the main room. Sometimes she'd talk, telling him pieces of her story in the darkness. Other times they'd just exist together in companionable silence, Slowly, carefully, she started letting him touch her, a hand on her shoulder when he passed, his arm around her waist when they worked together with a difficult horse. Brief moments of contact that she could control and end whenever she needed to. By November, she could stand beside him without flinching. By December, she'd lean into him sometimes when they sat together in the evenings. Small victories that felt enormous. The ranch continued to thrive. They were training 10 horses now, with a waiting list that stretched into spring. Elias had hired 2 ranch hands to help with the cattle and regular work, freeing up more time for the horse business. Money was actually accumulating in the tin on the top shelf. "We should expand the barn," Vivian said one evening, studying the cramped stalls. "Add 6 more stalls on the north side, and a proper training ring with good footing." "That's expensive." "We can afford it now, and we need the space if we're going to keep growing." Elias looked at her, saw the confidence in her stance, the way she talked about the future like she planned to be in it. "All right, we'll start in spring when the weather clears." She smiled at him, and it hit him all over again how beautiful she was when she wasn't afraid. Winter came hard and early that year. Snow piled up in the valleys, and the creek froze solid. They worked in brutal cold, breaking ice from water troughs every morning, hauling hay to the horses, keeping the fires going in the house and barn. On Christmas Eve, a blizzard rolled in that lasted 3 days. They were trapped in the house, unable to get to the barn except for absolutely necessary care. Elias went out every few hours to feed and water, coming back so cold he couldn't feel his fingers. The second night, Vivian stopped him at the door. "You're going to freeze to death doing this alone." "Someone has to." "Then I'm coming with you." They bundled up in every piece of clothing they owned and fought their way through waist-deep snow to the barn. The horses were huddled together for warmth, breath steaming in the frigid air. Working together, they broke ice, distributed hay, checked each animal for signs of frostbite or distress. On the way back to the house, the wind picked up so strong it nearly knocked them over. Visibility dropped to nothing. Elias grabbed Vivian's hand so they wouldn't get separated. "Stay close," he shouted over the howl of the storm. "Not planning on letting go." They made it to the porch more by luck than skill, stumbling through the door into the blessed warmth of the house. Both of them were shaking violently, covered in snow and ice. "Get those wet clothes off," Elias managed through chattering teeth. "You'll catch your death." They stripped down to underclothes and huddled by the fire, wrapped in every blanket they owned. Elias could see Vivian's lips were blue, her whole body convulsing with shivers. "Come here," he said, opening his arms. "Body heat. It's faster than the fire alone." She hesitated only a second before crawling into his embrace. He wrapped them both in the blankets and held her close, rubbing her arms and back to get the blood flowing again. "This is purely medicinal," she said against his chest. "Absolutely. Completely practical. Nothing romantic about hypothermia. Nothing at all." But she burrowed closer anyway, and he tightened his arms around her. They stayed like that for a long time, warming each other while the storm raged outside. "Elias? I'm glad I'm here. With you. Even if we're probably going to freeze to death." He smiled against her hair. "We're not going to freeze to death. You don't know that. I do. We're too stubborn to die. Both of us." She laughed, and he felt it against his ribs. True enough. The shivering finally stopped. The fire crackled and popped, throwing dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind screamed like something alive and furious. "Vivian?" "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For staying, for trying, for giving me a chance even when you were terrified." She was quiet for a moment. Then she shifted in his arms so she could see his face. "Thank you for being worth it," she said. And then carefully, telegraphing the movement so he could stop her if he wanted to, she leaned up and kissed him. It was brief and chaste, barely more than a brush of lips, but it was the first time she'd initiated any kind of intimacy, and it felt like everything. When she pulled back, her eyes were wide. "Was that okay?" she whispered. "More than okay." His voice came out rough. "But only if it was what you wanted." "It was. I've been wanting to for weeks. I needed to be sure I could." "And can you?" She kissed him again, longer this time. Still gentle, still careful, but with more confidence. Elias held perfectly still, letting her control everything, barely breathing. When she pulled away this time, she was smiling. Yes, she said. I think I can. They spent the rest of the storm wrapped together by the fire, talking and dozing and occasionally kissing like teenagers. It wasn't the passionate romance from dime novels. There was too much history, too much careful navigation of trauma and trust. But it was real, and it was theirs. And that made it perfect in its own way. When the storm finally broke on the third day, they emerged to a world transformed. Snow had buried everything in pristine white, sparkling in the sudden sunshine. The horses were fine, the barn had held, and they'd made it through together. That night, Vivian came to his bed, not for anything physical beyond sleeping beside him, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. But it was progress, huge and terrifying and brave. Is this all right? She asked, her voice small in the darkness. It's perfect. Are you all right? I think so. I'm scared, but not of you, just of, I don't know, messing this up. You won't. How do you know? Because there's no wrong way to do this. Whatever pace we go, whatever we choose to do or not do, it's right because we're choosing it together. She relaxed against him. I never thought I'd be able to do this again. Sleep next to someone and feel safe. You are safe. I promise. I know. She laced her fingers through his. That's the amazing part. I actually believe you. They slept like that, tangled together in the small bed, and when Elias woke in the morning with her still in his arms, he felt like the luckiest man alive. January brought a cold snap that killed 3 of Tom Brennan's cattle and froze the well pump solid. Elias and his ranch hands spent a week fixing it, working in temperatures so low that metal stuck to bare skin. But the horse business kept them solvent. Word had spread across 3 counties about the woman who could gentle any horse, no matter how damaged. People brought her animals that had been written off as lost causes, and she proved them wrong every time. In February, a wealthy rancher from Sacramento rode in with a gorgeous Arabian mare and a problem. Name's Margaret, he said, stroking the mare's neck. Cost me $500 from an importer in San Francisco. Supposed to be pure bloodline, finest Arabian stock. But she won't let anyone ride her. Not me, not my best horseman, nobody. I'm starting to think I got swindled. Vivian circled the mare slowly. Margaret was beautiful, fine-boned and elegant, with a coat like polished copper, but her eyes showed white and her ears stayed pinned flat. Has anyone hurt her? Vivian asked. Not that I know of. Been nothing but gentle with her since she arrived. What about before you got her? On the ship from overseas? The rancher frowned. I suppose anything could have happened during transport. Those ships are rough, and the handlers aren't always kind. Vivian moved closer, murmuring in a low voice. The mare stamped and tossed her head, but didn't bolt. She's not mean, Vivian said after a few minutes. She's absolutely terrified. Something traumatic happened, probably on that ship. She's associating humans with whatever it was. Can you fix her? I can try, but it might take months. I'll pay double your normal rate, triple if you can have her rideable by spring. Vivian glanced at Elias. He nodded slightly. They could definitely use that kind of money. All right, Vivian said, but I'm going to need you to leave her here for at least 2 months. And when you pick her up, you'll need to commit to continuing the work. I can lay the foundation, but you'll have to build on it. Done. Margaret arrived the next day and proceeded to make everyone's life difficult. She kicked at anyone who approached, tried to bite Elias when he brought her food, and screamed like a banshee whenever they put her in a stall. This is going to be your hardest case yet, Elias said, watching the mare destroy her 3rd water bucket. I know. But Vivian's eyes were bright with the challenge. But she's worth it. You can see the breeding in her lines. If we can bring her back, she'll be incredible. She started the way she always did, with patience and time. Hours spent just existing in Margaret's space, not asking for anything, just being present. The mare fought it at first, staying as far away as possible, but slowly, incrementally, she started to relax. By the end of the 1st week, Margaret would eat with Vivian in the corral. By the end of the 2nd, she'd let Vivian touch her neck. By the end of the 3rd, Vivian could run her hands over the mare's entire body, checking for old injuries or sources of pain. There, she said one evening, her fingers finding a spot on Margaret's withers. The mare flinched hard. Something happened here. See the scar tissue under the coat? Someone beat her with something metal, a chain maybe. On a ship crossing the ocean, trapped and terrified, getting beaten. Elias felt sick. No wonder she wants nothing to do with people. She just needs to learn that not all hands hurt. Same lesson they all need. Same lesson Vivian herself had needed to learn, Elias thought, but didn't say. The work with Margaret became Vivian's obsession. She spent every spare moment with the mare, talking to her, grooming her, teaching her that touch could be gentle. And slowly, impossibly, it worked. In mid-March, Vivian led Margaret into the training ring with a saddle blanket. The mare snorted and sidestepped, but didn't panic. Vivian laid the blanket across her back and left it there while they walked in slow circles. The next day, she added the saddle. The day after that, she stood on a mounting block and leaned over Margaret's back, putting weight on the saddle without actually mounting. "You're incredible," Elias said, watching from the fence. "You know that, right? I'm just doing what she needs." "No, you're doing what no one else could do. That's different." Vivian smiled at him over Margaret's back. "Maybe I learned from a good teacher." "Who taught you?" "The horses. And you. You taught me that patience pays off, that some things are worth waiting for." The way she looked at him made his chest tight. They'd been sharing a bed for 2 months now, though still nothing beyond sleeping and occasional kisses. Vivian said she was working up to more, and Elias believed her. She'd come so far already. In early April, 2 weeks before the rancher was due to collect Margaret, Vivian finally mounted her. It was a cool morning with mist still burning off the hills. Elias watched from the fence as Vivian led Margaret into the ring, talking to her in that low, constant murmur that seemed to calm even the most fractious horse. She checked the saddle, adjusted the stirrups, then stood for a long moment with her hand on Margaret's neck. "We're going to try something new today," she told the mare. "And I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Margaret's ears flicked forward, listening. Vivian took a deep breath, then lifted herself into the saddle in one smooth motion. Margaret went statue still. "Good girl," Vivian breathed. "Such a good, brave girl." She sat there for a full minute, just letting Margaret adjust to the weight. Then she squeezed gently with her legs. Margaret walked. She walked a full circle of the ring, calm as a plow horse, like she'd been doing this her whole life. Vivian's face was radiant with triumph. "Look at you," she called down to the mare. "Look at what you can do when you're not afraid." She rode for 10 more minutes before dismounting. The second her feet hit the ground, Margaret turned and pressed her forehead against Vivian's chest, a gesture of complete trust. Elias had to look away before the emotion overwhelmed him. That night, Vivian came to dinner glowing. "She's ready," she announced. "Margaret's ready. We did it." "You did it." "We did it. You believed in me, even when I wasn't sure I could pull it off." "I always believe in you." She came around the table and kissed him, hard and sudden and joyful. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "I have something to tell you," she said. "What?" "I think I'm ready for everything, for a real marriage." Elias's heart stopped. "Vivian, you don't have to eat. I know I don't have to. I want to. I'm tired of letting Thornton control my life from the grave. I'm tired of being afraid of something that should be good." She took his face in her hands. "I love you, Elias Carter, and I want to be your wife in every sense of the word." "Are you sure?" "I'm terrified, but I'm sure. We can wait longer if you need." I've been waiting my whole life to feel like this, safe enough to be vulnerable, strong enough to choose intimacy instead of having it forced on me. She kissed him again. "I don't want to wait anymore." So they didn't. That night, in the bedroom they'd been sharing for months, Vivian finally let down the last of her walls. It was awkward and halting and nothing like the romance novels promised. She had moments of panic that Elias had to talk her through. There were stops and starts and reassurances needed. But it was theirs, chosen and shared and honest. And when it was over, Vivian cried, not from pain or fear, but from relief and release and the overwhelming realization that she'd reclaimed something she thought was lost forever. "I did it," she whispered against Elias's chest. "I actually did it." "You did." He held her close, stroking her hair. "I'm so proud of you." "It wasn't perfect. It was perfect for us. That's all that matters." She fell asleep in his arms, really and truly his wife now, in every way. And Elias lay awake, overwhelmed with gratitude for this woman who'd fought so hard to heal, who'd chosen him even when choosing anyone felt impossible. When the rancher came to collect Margaret 2 weeks later, the mare loaded into his trailer without complaint. Vivian handed over detailed instructions for continuing the work, made him promise to write and update her on the mare's progress. "I don't know how you did it," the rancher said, counting out triple the agreed-upon payment. "But she's a different horse entirely. You've got a real gift, Mrs. Carter." After he left, Vivian stood in the empty corral, looking at the space where Margaret had been. "You all right?" Elias asked. "Yeah, I'm gonna miss her." "You get attached. Can't help it. Each one feels like saving a piece of myself." "Maybe that's exactly what you're doing." She turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" "Every horse you heal, every broken thing you fix, it's you proving to yourself that healing is possible, that trauma doesn't have to be permanent." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then she crossed the corral and took his hand. "When did you get so wise?" "I had a good teacher." They walked back to the house together as the sun set over the hills, painting everything gold and orange. Vivian was humming, something she'd started doing lately when she was happy. It was the best sound Elias had ever heard. That night, after dinner and chores and all the small rituals of their life together, Vivian pulled him close and whispered in his ear, "I think I might be pregnant." Time stopped. "What?" "I'm late. 3 weeks late. And I've been sick in the mornings." Her eyes were huge and uncertain. "I wasn't sure if I should tell you yet, but I can't keep it to myself." Elias sat down hard, his legs suddenly unable to hold him. "A baby. Are you happy about it?" "Happy?" "Vivian, He pulled her into his lap, holding her so tight she squeaked in protest. "I'm terrified and thrilled and completely overwhelmed. Of course I'm happy." She relaxed against him. "Good, because I'm all of those things too." "When will you know for sure?" "Few more weeks, probably, or I could ride into town and ask the doctor." "Do that. Tomorrow. I want to know." She laughed and kissed his cheek. "Tomorrow. I promise." The doctor confirmed it 3 days later. Vivian was about 2 months along, which meant the baby would come in late October or early November. Elias walked around in a daze for a week, unable to fully process that he was going to be a father. Vivian seemed calmer about it, more focused. She immediately started planning, figuring out how to handle the horse training business while pregnant, talking about converting the loft into a nursery, making lists of supplies they'd need. "We should get married properly," Elias said one night. "I mean, we're already married, but we never had a ceremony. We could do one now, make it real." "It already is real." "I know, but I want people to see it. I want to stand up in front of everyone and claim you as my wife. I want you to have that moment." She considered it. "All right, but nothing fancy. Just Tom and his wife as witnesses, maybe a few neighbors. And I want to do it here, on the ranch, not in town." "Whatever you want." They held the ceremony on a Sunday in late May, in the training ring where Vivian had worked so many miracles. Tom Brennan stood up for Elias. Tom's wife Martha stood for Vivian. The local circuit preacher said the words while the horses watched from the pasture fence. Vivian wore a simple dress she'd sewn herself, pale blue with white flowers embroidered on the collar. She looked beautiful and nervous and completely herself. When the preacher asked if Elias would take Vivian as his wife, he said, "I already have, but I'll do it again, every day for the rest of my life." And when Vivian was asked the same, she looked Elias dead in the eye and said, "This man saved my life. Marrying him isn't a question. It's the easiest answer I've ever given. Yes. Always yes." There wasn't a dry eye in the small gathering. They celebrated with a simple meal in the house afterward. Martha had brought a cake, Tom brought whiskey, and the neighbors brought well wishes and practical gifts for the baby. It wasn't fancy or elaborate, but it was warm and real and surrounded by people who genuinely cared about them. That night, alone again, Vivian and Elias lay in bed with her head on his chest and his hand resting on her still flat stomach. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually made this work." "We did. Against all odds. Despite everything. Because of everything, maybe. All that hard stuff made us strong enough to handle this." She laced her fingers through his free hand. "I never thought I'd be here. Happy, safe, loved. About to have a baby with a man I actually chose." Best decision I ever made, placing that advertisement. Best decision I ever made, answering it. They fell asleep like that, wrapped together, the future spreading out before them bright and uncertain, and theirs to build however they wanted. The lonely rancher and the frightened mail-order bride had become something neither of them expected: partners, equals, lovers, friends. A team strong enough to handle whatever came next. And outside, the horses dozed in their barn, testament to what patience and trust could build even from the most broken beginnings. Summer heat settled over the valley like a blanket as Vivian's belly began to show. She worked through the first trimester nausea with the same stubborn determination she brought to everything else, spending mornings bent over the slop bucket and afternoons in the training ring like nothing had happened. "You need to rest," Elias told her after finding her mucking out stalls in the midday heat for the third day running. "I'm pregnant, not dying." "You're supposed to take it easy." "Says who? Women have been working through pregnancy since the beginning of time. I'm not going to sit around getting soft just because there's a baby coming." She was right, but that didn't stop Elias from worrying. He found himself watching her constantly, ready to jump in if she lifted anything too heavy or stayed on her feet too long. It drove her crazy. "I can carry a water bucket," she snapped at him one afternoon when he tried to take it from her. "Stop treating me like I'm made of glass. I'm just trying to help." "You're hovering. There's a difference." They had their first real fight that night, voices raised in a way they never had before. Elias saying she was being reckless with her health and the babies. Vivian saying he was being controlling, and she wouldn't go back to being told what she could and couldn't do. "That's not fair," Elias said, his voice going quiet and hurt. "You know I'm nothing like him." Vivian stopped mid-sentence, the anger draining from her face. "You're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said that. I'm just scared, Vivian. What if something happens to you?" "Nothing's going to happen to me. Women have babies every day." "Women die having babies every day too. My sister did." The words hung between them. Vivian's expression softened completely. "I didn't think about that," she said quietly. "About your sister. That's what you're afraid of. Every minute of every day." She crossed the room and took his hands. "I'm strong, stronger than I look. And I'll be careful, I promise. But I can't stop working entirely. It'll make me crazy." "What if we compromise? You keep working with the horses, but no heavy lifting, no mucking stalls or hauling hay, just the training work. And you stop watching me like I'm about to collapse any second? I'll try." "Good enough." She kissed him, soft and reassuring. "We're going to be fine, all three of us." The ranch hands took over more of the heavy work. Tom Brennan's oldest son started coming by 3 times a week to help with the worst chores, and Vivian focused on what she did best, gentling the steady stream of problem horses that kept arriving. By August, she was noticeably pregnant, her belly round and firm under her work dresses. The baby kicked constantly, especially when she was working with the horses. "I think this one's going to be a trainer too," she told Elias, pressing his hand to her stomach so he could feel the movement. "Feel that? Baby gets active every time I'm in the ring. Or it's trying to tell you to sit down. Don't you start too." But there was no heat in it. They'd found their rhythm again, learning to navigate this new phase together. In September, a letter arrived that changed everything. Vivian was in the kitchen making preserves from the wild plums that grew near the creek when Elias came in with the mail. One envelope stood out from the usual bills and supply catalogs, addressed in careful script to Mrs. Vivian Carter. "It's from Boston," Elias said, handing it to her. Vivian's hand shook as she opened it. She read in silence, her face going pale, then flushed, then pale again. "What is it?" Elias asked when she just stood there staring at the page. "It's from my brother, Thomas. He found me." "How?" "He hired a detective, spent the last 2 years searching. He thought I was dead until 6 months ago when someone mentioned seeing a woman matching my description in California." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "He wants to come visit. He wants to meet you. He says he's sorry he couldn't protect me from Thornton. That wasn't his fault. He was just a kid." "I know, but he's carried it all this time." She read the letter again, her lips moving silently. "He's 20 now, a man grown, and I've missed all of it. Write him back. Tell him to come. What if he hates what I've become? What if he's disappointed? Then he's an idiot. But I don't think he will be. You're incredible, Vivian. Anyone can see that. She wrote back that same day, her hand cramping from how fast she scrawled the words. Yes, come visit. Yes, I want to see you. Yes, I'm all right now. Better than all right. Thomas arrived 6 weeks later on a crisp October morning, just as the aspens were turning gold on the hillsides. He stepped off the stage in Prescott Valley looking so much like their father that Vivian gasped. But when he smiled, it was all his own. Warm and genuine and breaking with emotion. Vivi, he said, using the childhood nickname she'd forgotten. Look at you. She was 8 months pregnant now, huge and awkward and self-conscious about it. But Thomas didn't seem to care. He swept her into a careful hug, mindful of her belly, and held on like he'd never let go. I thought you were dead, he said into her hair. When you disappeared, when no one could find you, I thought Thornton had killed you. He tried, just not the way you'd think. Thomas pulled back, his expression darkening. Did he hurt you? I need to know. Yes, but I'm past it now, mostly. I should have stopped the wedding. I should have done more than just punch him. You were 10 years old. What could you have done? Something, anything. He looked at Elias, who'd been hanging back to give them space. You must be the husband. Elias Carter. He held out his hand. Your sisters told me a lot about you. Thomas shook it firmly. All good, I hope. The best. She said you tried to fight Thornton at the wedding. That took guts. A lot of good it did. Thomas turned back to Vivian. I blame myself for years. If I'd fought harder, been smarter, found a way to stop it. Stop, Vivian said gently. That's Father's guilt to carry, not yours. He's the one who sold me. You tried to save me. That's what I remember. Is he still alive, Father? I don't know. I haven't asked. Don't particularly care. Thomas nodded slowly. He drank himself to death 2 years ago. Liver gave out. I thought you should know. Vivian waited to feel something. Relief, maybe, or grief, or anger. But there was nothing. Just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter was closed. Good riddance, she said finally. They took Thomas back to the ranch and showed him around. He was impressed by the operation they'd built, fascinated by the horses, delighted by the story of how Vivian had transformed the failing cattle ranch into a thriving training business. You always were good with animals, he said, watching her work a nervous gelding in the ring. Remember that stray dog you brought home? The one everyone said was vicious? Bruno, he wasn't vicious, just scared. You had him eating out of your hand in a week. Father wanted to shoot him, but you wouldn't let anyone near him except you. What happened to him? Thomas's face fell. Thornton had him killed, week after the wedding, said he didn't want some mongrel around his new wife. Vivian went very still. I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know, a lot I need to tell you. He glanced at Elias. Could I talk to my sister alone for a bit? Of course. Elias headed back to the barn, leaving them in the training ring. Thomas waited until he was out of earshot. Thornton's dead too. I know, heart attack. I was there. That's not how he died. Vivian's head snapped around. What? The official cause was heart failure, but the doctor I bribed said there were irregularities, signs of poisoning. They covered it up because Thornton had powerful friends, but someone killed him, Vivi, and I need to know if it was you. The question hung in the autumn air between them. Vivian's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Why would you think that? Because I would have. If I'd been in your position. If I'd had the chance. Thomas's voice was steady, no judgment in it. And because you disappeared the same day he died. That's not a coincidence. Vivian looked at her hands. They were shaking. I didn't kill him, she said quietly, but I thought about it. Every single day for 2 years I thought about it, planned it, figured out which of his medicines I could tamper with, which foods I could poison. I had 100 different scenarios. But you didn't do it. No, I was too afraid, too broken. By the time I finally got brave enough to try, he was already dead. She met her brother's eyes. I don't know who killed him, but whoever it was did the world a favor. Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I did. Vivian's breath stopped. I came home from boarding school for Christmas. I was 18, finally big enough to do something. I put foxglove in his whiskey over the course of 3 days. Just a little bit each time, enough to mimic heart failure. He was dead before New Year's. Thomas, I'm not sorry. I'd do it again. He deserved worse than a quiet death in his sleep. His voice was fierce. But I need you to know that I tried to find you afterward. I searched for months. When I couldn't, I assumed you'd run and I was glad. I hoped you'd gotten somewhere safe. Vivian didn't know what to say. Her little brother had killed for her, had carried that weight alone for years. Does anyone else know? She asked. No, and they never will. I'm careful. Always have been. He touched her shoulder. I just needed you to know, needed you to understand that you were avenged, even if you didn't know it. I don't know how to feel about this. You don't have to feel anything. It's done. He's gone. We're both free. Thomas managed a small smile. And you're about to have a baby, and you've built this incredible life. That's what matters now. Vivian pulled him into another hug, this one fiercer. Thank you for trying to save me, for actually saving me, even if I didn't know it. You're my sister. It's what family does. They walked back to the house together, and Vivian felt something shift inside her, the last piece of her past clicking into place. Thornton was dead, killed by her brother's hand. Her father was dead, drunk and alone. And she was here, alive and loved and free. Thomas stayed for 2 weeks. He helped with the ranch work, charmed the horses, told stories about their childhood that made Vivian laugh until her sides hurt. And he and Elias became friends, the kind of easy camaraderie that happens between good men who respect each other. You take care of her, Thomas said the night before he left, standing on the porch with Elias while Vivian slept inside. With my life. She's stronger than she seems, but she's also more fragile than she'll admit. You need to know both sides. I do. Thomas nodded, satisfied. Good. Then you'll do right by her. He pulled out a folded paper. I'm leaving you my address in San Francisco. I'm working for a shipping company now, doing well. If you ever need anything, money or help or just someone to talk to, you write me. We're family now. I will. Thank you. And when that baby comes, you send me word immediately. I want to know the second I'm an uncle. Elias grinned. Deal. Thomas left the next morning on the early stage, hugging Vivian so hard she complained about her ribs. She cried watching him go, but they were good tears this time. Healing tears. The baby came 3 weeks later on a cold November night. Vivian's water broke while she was feeding the chickens. She made it back to the house and calmly told Elias to fetch Martha Brennan, then proceeded to labor for the next 18 hours. It was brutal. Martha had assisted at dozens of births and said she'd rarely seen one so difficult. The baby was positioned wrong, wouldn't turn, and Vivian was small-hipped to begin with. By dawn, she was screaming with every contraction, far past the point of trying to be brave. Elias stayed with her the whole time, letting her break his hand with her grip, wiping her face with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement even as his own terror mounted. I can't do this, Vivian gasped during a brief lull. Elias, I can't. It's too much. Yes, you can. You're the strongest person I know. I'm going to die. Like your sister. I'm going to die and leave you alone with this baby. You're not going to die. I won't let you. That's not how it works. She cut off with another scream as the contraction hit. Martha checked her again, her face grim. Baby's in distress. We need to get it out now or we'll lose them both. What do we do? Elias demanded. You hold her down. This is going to hurt like hell. What followed was the worst hour of Elias's life. Martha had to manually turn the baby, her hands inside Vivian while she screamed and thrashed. Elias held her shoulders, talking to her constantly, begging her to hold on, promising her everything would be all right, even though he had no idea if that was true. Finally, mercifully, the baby shifted. Martha nodded. There, now push, Vivian. Push hard. Vivian pushed and pushed and pushed until Elias thought she'd tear herself apart with the effort. And then, impossibly, a baby's cry filled the room. It's a girl, Martha announced, holding up a tiny, squalling, perfect little human. You have a daughter. Vivian collapsed back against the pillows, sobbing with relief and exhaustion. Elias couldn't move, couldn't think, could only stare at this impossibly small person who was somehow his. Martha cleaned the baby and wrapped her in a blanket, then placed her on Vivian's chest. The infant immediately stopped crying, her tiny fist curling against her mother's skin. "Hello," Vivian whispered, her voice wrecked. "Hello, little one. We've been waiting for you." Elias sat on the edge of the bed, one hand on Vivian's shoulder, the other gently touching his daughter's head. She had dark hair, lots of it, and when she opened her eyes they were blue-gray like Vivian's. "She's perfect," he managed. "She is." Vivian looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "We did it." "You did it. I just held on." "We did it together." She kissed the baby's head. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed names for months but never settled on one. Now looking at his daughter, Elias knew exactly what to call her. "Grace," he said, "because she's a gift we didn't deserve." Vivian smiled. "Grace Carter, I love it." Martha finished cleaning up and left them alone with their daughter. Elias climbed into bed beside Vivian, careful of her bruised and battered body, and they lay there together with Grace between them as the sun came up over the hills. "I was so scared," Vivian admitted quietly. "I thought I was going to die and leave you alone." "You didn't, though. You fought through it." "Barely. If Martha hadn't been here." "But she was, and you're both fine. That's what matters." Grace made a small sound, her mouth working like she was already looking for food. Vivian shifted her, wincing, and tried to figure out how to nurse. It took several awkward attempts before the baby latched on, and then Vivian laughed despite her exhaustion. "Look at her. She knows exactly what she wants." "Takes after her mother." They dozed off like that, all three of them, and when Elias woke a few hours later, he sent word to Thomas in San Francisco. "Daughter born, Grace. Mother and baby healthy. You're an uncle." Recovery was slow. Vivian had torn badly and needed weeks to heal. She hated being bedridden, hated having to depend on Martha and Elias and the ranch hands to keep everything running. But she focused on Grace, learning to nurse and change and soothe her, and slowly regained her strength. By Christmas, she was back on her feet, though still sore. Grace was 6 weeks old, alert and curious, and already showing signs of her mother's stubborn will. "She's going to be trouble," Elias said, watching his daughter refuse to sleep despite obvious exhaustion. "I can tell already." "Good. Trouble keeps you sharp." They celebrated their first Christmas as a family. Quietly, just the three of them. Elias had carved a small wooden horse for Grace, even though she was too young to appreciate it. Vivian gave him a new hat she'd ordered from the catalog. They exchanged gifts and ate a simple meal and put Grace to bed in the cradle Elias had built. "This is everything I never thought I'd have," Vivian said that night, lying in bed with Elias. "A home, a family, safety. You've earned it. So have you. You took a chance on a terrified stranger and built a life with her." "Best gamble I ever took." Grace woke them 3 times that night demanding food, and they stumbled through the next day exhausted and cranky. But there was joy in it too, the kind that comes from being exactly where you're supposed to be. The years rolled forward. Grace grew into a fierce, bright-eyed toddler who followed Vivian everywhere and showed an early fascination with the horses. By the time she was 3, she could identify every horse on the ranch by name and temperament. When Grace was 4, Vivian discovered she was pregnant again. This time was easier, both the pregnancy and the birth. Their son arrived on a warm April morning after only 6 hours of labor, healthy and loud and hungry. They named him Thomas, after Vivian's brother. Thomas Brennan came to visit when young Tom was 2 months old, bringing extravagant gifts and stories from San Francisco. He'd married a school teacher named Eleanor, and they were expecting their first child. "We're both building families," he said, holding his nephew awkwardly until Eleanor showed him the right way. "Strange how things work out." "Strange and wonderful," Vivian agreed. The ranch continued to prosper. Their reputation spread beyond California, bringing clients from Nevada, Oregon, even as far as Texas. They expanded the barn, added more training rings, hired 2 full-time trainers to work under Vivian's supervision. Grace started helping with the horses at age 6, showing the same intuitive understanding her mother had. Young Tom preferred the cattle and the land, spending his days following Elias around and asking endless questions about everything. They were different children, but both fiercely loved. The years brought challenges too. A drought in Grace's 7th summer that nearly bankrupted them. A winter so harsh they lost half their training stock to illness. A fire that destroyed the original barn and forced them to rebuild. But they weathered it all together, Elias and Vivian, partners in everything. The frightened mail-order bride had become a confident businesswoman, respected throughout the territory. The lonely rancher had become a devoted husband and father, content in ways he'd never imagined possible. On their 10th anniversary, Elias took Vivian back to the spot where they'd first kissed, that corral where she'd spun in a circle with the horses following her. "Do you remember?" he asked. "Every second of it. I was terrified and hopeful and had no idea what I was doing. And now," she smiled, "now I know exactly what I'm doing, and I'm still terrified sometimes, but the hopeful part got a lot stronger. I love you, Vivian Carter, more every day. I love you too, even when you hover." "I don't hover." "You absolutely hover." They laughed, and he kissed her there in the same spot where he'd first told her he loved her, where she'd first started to believe she could build a life worth living. Grace was 12 and Tom was 8 when the telegram arrived from San Francisco. Thomas had died in a shipping accident, crushed by falling cargo on the docks. He'd left behind Eleanor and 3 young children. Vivian took it hard, locking herself in the barn for hours, emerging red-eyed and quiet. Elias gave her space to grieve, knowing she needed to process it in her own way. That night she came to him with a proposition. "I want to bring them here, Eleanor and the children. They have nothing in San Francisco, but here they'd have family, land, a future." "It's a big ask, Vivian. 3 more children, plus Eleanor, so—" "I know, but Thomas saved me, twice. Once from Thornton, and once by reminding me that family could be good. I owe him this." Elias looked at his wife, saw the fierce determination in her eyes, and knew there was only one answer. "All right, we'll make it work." They added on to the house, building a whole new wing for Eleanor and her children. She arrived in late summer, hollow-eyed with grief but grateful beyond words for the refuge. Her children, 2 boys and a girl, were shell-shocked and quiet at first. But Grace and young Tom took them under their wings, showing them the ranch, teaching them about horses, including them in everything. Slowly, painfully, Eleanor began to heal. She took over managing the business side of the ranch, freeing up Vivian to focus more on training. She was smart and organized and brought a level of professionalism they'd been lacking. Within a year, she'd expanded their client base and improved their profit margins by 30%. "Your brother chose well," Elias told Vivian one evening, watching Eleanor teach all 5 children their letters at the kitchen table. "He did. She's good for us. Good for the kids. Think she'll marry again?" "Maybe, when she's ready. There's no rush." The ranch became a true family operation. Grace, at 14, was already training horses on her own under Vivian's supervision. Tom, at 10, had taken over managing the cattle herd with Elias. Eleanor's children found their own niches. The oldest boy showed promise as a farrier. The daughter had a gift for healing sick animals. The youngest was still figuring himself out. They were loud and chaotic and constantly underfoot, but the house felt alive in a way it never had before. On Vivian's 40th birthday, Elias organized a celebration that brought together everyone whose lives had been touched by the ranch. Clients whose horses she'd saved, neighbors they'd helped through hard times, the ranch hands who'd become like family. Tom Brennan, now in his 60s, raised a toast. 20 years ago, Elias Carter brought home a scared girl from Boston and told me she was his wife. I'll be honest, I didn't think it would last a month, but I've never been happier to be wrong. Vivian, you've built something extraordinary here, not just a business, but a legacy. Here's to you. Everyone drank and cheered. Vivian stood up, Grace on one side and young Tom on the other, and looked out at the gathering. When I came here, I thought I was running away from my life. Turns out I was running toward it. Everything good I have, everything I've built, started the day Elias took a chance on me. So this toast isn't just for me. It's for all of us. For second chances and new beginnings, and the courage it takes to keep trying even when you're scared. Thank you all for being part of our story. The party lasted until dawn, music and laughter spilling out across the valley. And when everyone had finally gone home and the house was quiet again, Elias and Vivian sat on the porch, watching the sun come up over the hills they'd worked for 20 years. "We did all right, didn't we?" Elias said. "Better than all right. We did something most people only dream about. We built something that'll outlast us." Think the kids will keep it going? Grace will. She's got the gift. And Tom's got the head for business. Between them, they'll manage. Vivian leaned against his shoulder. We gave them something neither of us had growing up. A home, safety, the knowledge that they're loved no matter what. That's the real legacy, not the ranch or the business, the family. The family, Vivian agreed. They sat there until the sun cleared the hills, two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something worth keeping. And in the barn, the horses that had witnessed it all dozed in their stalls, living proof that broken things could heal if given patience and time and love enough to last. The years that followed Vivian's 40th birthday brought a rhythm that felt earned rather than lucky. Grace turned 16 and started taking on clients of her own, her reputation growing even beyond her mother's. Young Tom, at 12, had the steady temperament of someone twice his age, managing the ranch books with Eleanor and making decisions that kept them profitable even in lean years. But time, as it always does, began to show its hand. Elias turned 52 and found that his back didn't straighten as easily after a day's work. His hands ached in the mornings, joints swollen from decades of hard labor. He didn't complain, but Vivian noticed the way he moved more carefully, the way he'd pause and stretch before lifting anything heavy. "You need to slow down," she told him one evening after watching him hobble in from fixing a fence line. "I'm fine. You're limping." "It's nothing, just tweaked my knee." "Elias Carter, you're the worst liar I've ever met. Let me look at it." He sat down heavily and let her examine his leg. The knee was swollen, hot to the touch. She wrapped it with a cold compress and made him promise to stay off it for a week. "A week? Vivian, I can't." "You can and you will. Tom and the hands can manage without you for 7 days. And if they can't, then we haven't trained them well enough." He grumbled but obeyed, spending the week reading in the chair by the window and driving everyone crazy with suggestions about how they should be doing things. By the end of it, Vivian was ready to push him out the door herself. "You're impossible when you're idle," she informed him. "I'm worried. What if something goes wrong?" "Then they'll handle it. That's what family does." The knee healed, but Elias moved differently after that, more cautiously, like he was finally accepting that he wasn't invincible. Vivian noticed other changes too. Her own hair, which had started graying in her 30s, was now more silver than brown. Lines had deepened around her eyes and mouth. Her hands, scarred from years of rope burns and horse bites, ached on cold mornings. They were getting old. There was no way around it. Grace married at 19, a young rancher from 2 counties over who'd come to learn Vivian's methods and stayed for her daughter. The wedding was held in the training ring where so many transformations had taken place, and Vivian cried through the entire ceremony. "I'm not losing her," Elias whispered, squeezing her hand. "I know, but she's not ours anymore, not the same way. She'll always be ours." Grace and her husband, Daniel, built a house on the far end of the property and started their own breeding program, focusing on Arabian horses with good temperaments. Within 2 years, they had their first child, a daughter they named Vivian. Holding her granddaughter for the first time, Vivian felt something shift in her chest. This tiny person carried her name, her blood, her legacy. The frightened girl who'd stepped off that stagecoach so many years ago had become someone's grandmother. "Look at her," she murmured to Elias, who was peering over her shoulder at the baby. "Look what we made." "You made. I just helped. We made. Together. All of this." Little Vivian, Vivi, they called her, was followed by 2 brothers in quick succession. Young Tom married Eleanor's daughter, Margaret, when he turned 21, and they had 4 children over the next 8 years. The ranch that had once been home to 2 lonely people was now overrun with grandchildren, noise, chaos, and more love than seemed possible to contain in one place. Elias was 60 when the first serious scare happened. He'd gone out to check on a mare who was foaling and collapsed in the barn. Tom found him an hour later, conscious but gray-faced and struggling to breathe. They got him to the house and sent for the doctor, who arrived 3 hours later looking grim. "His heart's weak," the doctor said after examining him. "Could give out any time. He needs to stop working, stop exerting himself, complete rest for at least 6 months, maybe longer." "That's not happening," Elias said from the bed. "It has to happen, unless you want to die and leave your wife a widow." That shut him up. Vivian sat beside him and took his hand. "You're going to listen to the doctor. I'm not losing you because you're too stubborn to sit still. The ranch will be fine. Tom and Grace have it under control. You trained them well. Now, let them prove it." So Elias rested and fumed and worried and slowly, grudgingly healed. After 3 months, the doctor cleared him for light work. Emphasis on light. No heavy lifting, no long days, no pushing through exhaustion. "You're officially retired," Vivian told him. "Think of it as a promotion to supervisor." "I don't want to be supervisor. I want to work." "Then supervise the work. Teach the grandchildren. Share your knowledge. That's just as important." He found his new role slowly, teaching young Vivi how to read a horse's body language, showing Tom's oldest son how to repair tack properly, sitting in the training ring while Grace worked and offering the occasional suggestion. It wasn't the same as doing the work himself, but it had its own satisfaction. Vivian, meanwhile, continued training at a reduced pace. Her body couldn't handle the long hours anymore, but she took on a few special cases each year, the horses no one else could reach. At 55, she was still the best in the territory at gentling traumatized animals. "You should write it down," Eleanor suggested one evening. "Everything you know about training, make it a book. People would pay good money for that knowledge." "I'm not a writer." "You don't have to be. Just tell me what you do, and I'll write it down. We'll publish it and sell it alongside our training services. It'll bring in additional income and spread your methods further." It took 2 years, but they did it. Evenings by lamplight, Vivian talking through her techniques while Eleanor took notes and organized them into chapters. Grace contributed sketches of proper positioning and equipment. Tom handled the business side, finding a publisher in San Francisco. The Art of Gentling, Methods for Training Traumatized Horses, was published when Vivian was 57. It sold out its first printing in 6 months and went through 3 more editions over the next 2 years. Suddenly, Vivian was receiving letters from trainers across the country, thanking her for teaching them a better way. "You're famous," Elias teased, watching her read through another stack of correspondence. "I'm old and tired. There's a difference. You're a legend. Own it." She swatted at him, but she was smiling. They celebrated their 30th anniversary quietly, just the two of them riding out to the spot where Elias had first confessed his love. The aspens were gold, and the air had that particular clarity that only comes in autumn. 30 years, Vivian said, dismounting carefully. Her hip had been bothering her lately, arthritis settling in. "I never thought I'd make it this long." "With me or just in general?" "Both." She took his hand. "When I got on that stagecoach in Boston, I was running toward death. I didn't care if I lived or died, just wanted it to be different from what I'd had. But you made me want to live. Really live." "You did that yourself. I just gave you space to figure it out." "You gave me everything." She kissed him, soft and familiar. "I love you, Elias Carter, even after 30 years of putting up with your hovering." "I don't hover." "You absolutely hover." They laughed, and it felt young again despite their aging bodies. Some things never changed. The next decade passed in a strange mixture of contentment and gradual decline. Elias's heart condition worsened, requiring more medication and rest. Vivian's hip deteriorated until she could barely walk some days. They both stubbornly refused to be invalids, continuing to work in whatever capacity they could manage. Grace took over the training business completely by the time Vivian turned 65. Tom managed the ranch operations with his usual competence. The grandchildren, now ranging from teenagers to young adults, had begun having children of their own. "We're great-grandparents," Elias said wonderingly, holding Tom's first great-grandson. "How did that happen?" "Time," Vivian said simply. "Just time, moving the way it does." She was 68 when she started feeling tired all the time. Not the normal tiredness of age, but something deeper. A weariness that sleep couldn't touch. She ignored it for months, not wanting to worry anyone. But when she collapsed while feeding the chickens, there was no hiding it anymore. The doctor came, examined her, and pulled Elias aside. "It's her lungs. I suspect consumption, though it could be something else. Either way, she doesn't have long. Months, maybe." "I'm sorry." Elias felt the words hit him like a physical blow. "You're sure?" "I've seen it too many times to be wrong. Keep her comfortable. Let her make peace with it. That's all you can do." He told her that night, sitting on the edge of their bed while she leaned against the headboard, too exhausted to sit up fully. The doctor says it's consumption. I figured it was something like that. Her voice was calm. How long? He didn't give an exact timeline. Elias. How long? Months. Maybe. She nodded slowly like she'd expected it. All right then. We'll make them count. Vivian, don't. Don't fall apart on me yet. I need you strong a little while longer. I don't know how to do this without you. You'll manage. You're stronger than you think. She took his hand. We need to talk to the children, and I need to see everything one more time. The ranch, the horses, all of it, while I still can. They gathered the family the next morning. Grace, Tom, Eleanor, all the grandchildren and great-grandchildren who were old enough to understand. Vivian told them plainly what the doctor had said. No sugarcoating, no false hope. Grace broke down immediately, burying her face in Daniel's shoulder. Tom went white and still, his jaw tight. The grandchildren cried or looked shocked or tried to be brave. Little Vivi, now 19 and a talented trainer in her own right, held her grandmother's hand and refused to let go. I'm not afraid, Vivian told them all. I've lived a full life, longer and better than I ever expected. You all made that possible, every single one of you. We're not ready to lose you, Grace said through tears. You're never ready. That's the thing about death. It comes whether you're ready or not. Vivian managed a smile. But I'm leaving you with something good. This ranch, this family, the methods I've taught you, that's all going to outlast me. That's what matters. Over the next months, Vivian made her peace with dying in her own way. She visited every corner of the ranch, saying goodbye to the land she'd worked for 40 years. She spent time with each grandchild individually, sharing stories and advice, and making sure they knew how much she loved them. And she worked with one final horse. A ranch hand found him wandering the far pasture, a wild Mustang stallion who'd somehow gotten onto their property. He was magnificent and terrified, scarred from fighting and barely holding himself together. We should chase him off, Tom said. He's dangerous. Leave him, Vivian said. I want to try. Mott, you can barely walk. You can't work a horse like that. I'm not planning to work him. Just talk to him. She went out to the pasture every day, sitting on an overturned bucket while the stallion watched her from a distance. She didn't approach, didn't try to catch him, just sat there, breathing through the pain in her chest, letting him get used to her presence. After 2 weeks, he started moving closer. After 3, he ate an apple from her hand. After 4, he let her touch his neck. What are you trying to prove? Elias asked, watching from the fence one afternoon. Nothing. I just wanted to do it one more time. Reach something broken and show it that trust is still possible. You've done that 100 times, and I'll do it once more. For me. The stallion, who Grace had named Phoenix, eventually let Vivian halter him. She led him into the corral and stood with him for an hour, just breathing together, understanding passing between woman and horse in the way that had always been her gift. He'll make a good breeding stud, she told Grace later. He's got spirit. Don't break it. Just channel it. I won't. I learned from the best. By December, Vivian could barely get out of bed. The coughing had worsened, sometimes bringing up blood. Elias moved into the bedroom full time, sleeping in a chair beside her, helping her with everything she could no longer do herself. You should rest, she told him on a particularly bad night. You'll make yourself sick. I'm not leaving you. Stubborn man. Learn from a stubborn woman. She smiled, then coughed until she couldn't breathe. He held her through it, rubbing her back, murmuring comfort. When it finally subsided, she lay back exhausted. Elias? I'm here. Thank you. For everything. For taking a chance on me. For being patient. For loving me when I couldn't love myself. It was the easiest thing I ever did. Liar. But her eyes were soft. We did good though, didn't we? Built something worth keeping. The best thing I've ever been part of. Tell me about it. Tell me what you see when you look at this place. So he did. He told her about Grace's training program that was now recognized across 3 states, about Tom's careful stewardship of the land, rotating pastures and managing resources so the ranch would last another 100 years, about the grandchildren who'd grown into capable adults, each contributing to the family legacy in their own way, about Phoenix, the wild stallion she'd gentled with her last bit of strength, who was already siring foals that showed his spirit and intelligence. About the book that was still selling, teaching her methods to trainers she'd never meet. About the family they'd built from nothing, broken pieces coming together to make something whole. That's our real achievement, Vivian whispered. Not the ranch or the money or the reputation, the family, the love, the proof that damaged things can heal if given the right conditions. You proved that yourself. You were the first broken thing I ever saw heal completely. I wasn't alone in it. You were there every step. One day at a time. One day at a time, she echoed, all the way to the end. She slipped into a coma 2 days before Christmas. The family gathered, filling the house with quiet presence. They took turns sitting with her, holding her hand, telling her stories and memories. The grandchildren sang carols. Grace read from the book Vivian had written. Tom talked about the ranch's plans for next year, including her in the future even though they all knew she wouldn't see it. Elias barely left her side. He held her hand and talked to her about their life together, reminding her of moments both big and small. The day they met. The first time she'd kissed him. Grace's birth. Tom's first day managing the books. Every anniversary, every triumph, every quiet morning watching the sun come up over the hills they'd worked together. I'm not ready, he told her, though he knew she probably couldn't hear. I know you said I'd manage, but I'm not ready to do this without you. You've been my partner, my best friend, my whole world for 43 years. How am I supposed to just keep going when you're gone? Her breathing changed, growing shallower. He squeezed her hand. But I will. I'll keep going because that's what you'd want. I'll take care of the family and the ranch and make sure everything you built continues. I'll tell the great-grandchildren about you until they're sick of hearing it. I'll make sure no one forgets what you did here, how you took a failing ranch and turned it into something extraordinary. Grace and Tom came in, standing on either side of the bed. The three of them waited together as Vivian's breathing slowed further, the pauses between breaths growing longer. I love you, Elias whispered. I love you, and I'll see you again someday. Wait for me. Vivian took one more shallow breath, then stopped. The room went silent except for the sound of 3 people crying. They buried her on a hillside overlooking the ranch, in sight of the training ring where she'd worked so many miracles. The funeral drew people from across the territory, clients, trainers, neighbors, friends. Everyone who'd been touched by her gift, her patience, her stubborn refusal to accept that anything was truly broken beyond repair. Grace gave the eulogy, her voice breaking but steady. My mother taught me that healing isn't about fixing what's broken. It's about creating conditions where healing can happen naturally. She did that for horses, but she did it for people too. For all of us. She took my father, a lonely rancher who'd given up on connection, and showed him what partnership could be. She took me and Tom and raised us to believe we could do anything. She took Eleanor and her children and gave them a home when they had nowhere else to go. She took this ranch and turned it into a legacy that will outlast all of us. She paused, wiping her eyes. She also taught me that broken things aren't worth less than whole things, that trauma doesn't define you unless you let it, that patience and love can accomplish what force never could. Those lessons are her real legacy. The ranch will eventually be sold or absorbed into something else. The book will go out of print someday. But the things she taught us, the way she loved us, that's forever. After the funeral, Elias stood at the grave until everyone else had left. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink and gold. Well, he said to the fresh-turned earth, here we are. You gotta go first, after all. The wind picked up, rustling through the grass. I meant what I said. I'm gonna keep going. For you, for the kids, for this place we built. But damn it, Vivian, I miss you already. I miss your voice in the morning. I miss watching you work. I miss arguing about whether or not I hover. He smiled despite the tears. I do hover. You were right. I hovered because I loved you so much it scared me. Because I knew how lucky I was and I didn't want to lose you. But I guess I was always going to lose you eventually. That's how time works. He stood there until the stars came out, talking to her, saying all the things he hadn't had time to say before she'd slipped away. Finally, when the cold drove him back toward the house, he paused at the gate. One more thing. Thank you for answering that advertisement, for taking a chance on a stranger, for choosing me over and over, every day for 43 years. You made my life worth living, I hope I did the same for you. The years after Vivian's death were hard. Elias went through the motions, fulfilling the promise he'd made to keep going. He supervised the ranch, spent time with the grandchildren, and worked on organizing Vivian's notes and journals for a second, more comprehensive edition of her book. But part of him had died with her. Everyone could see it. Grace moved back into the main house to keep him company. Tom stopped by every day. The grandchildren took turns visiting, making sure he wasn't alone too much. But Elias was going through something they couldn't help with, the slow process of learning to exist without the person who'd been his other half for most of his adult life. He started spending evenings at Vivian's grave, talking to her like she was still there, telling her about his day, asking her opinion on ranch decisions, sharing gossip about the grandchildren. People probably thought he was losing his mind, but he didn't care. It made him feel close to her. On what would have been their 45th anniversary, he rode out to the spot where they'd first kissed. Phoenix, the last horse Vivian had gentled, had been trained by Grace and was now Elias's mount. The stallion was patient with his aging rider, seeming to understand that this trip was important. Elias sat on the overturned bucket Vivian had used when working Phoenix, looking out at the valley they'd built their life in. 45 years, he said to the wind. Feels like both forever and not nearly enough time. Phoenix grazed nearby, unconcerned. Grace is doing incredible work. You'd be proud. She's got 3 of the top trainers in California studying under her now. And Tom just negotiated a deal to supply horses to the cavalry. We're more successful than ever. He paused, his chest tight. But none of it means anything without you here to share it with. I wake up every morning and reach for you before I remember you're gone. I hear something interesting and think, I need to tell Vivian about this before I remember I can't. It's like living with a constant ache that never quite goes away. He'd lost weight over the past year, his clothes hanging loose. His heart condition had worsened, and the doctor had warned him multiple times to take it easy. But Elias didn't see much point in being careful anymore. I'm tired, he admitted to the empty air. Not physically, though that too, but tired of doing this alone, tired of half a life. I did what I promised. I kept going, made sure everything we built continued. The family's strong. The ranch is thriving. They don't need me anymore. Not really. Phoenix raised his head, ears pricked forward like he was listening. So I'm ready, whenever you are, to join you, to stop being half of something and be whole again. He stood slowly, his knees protesting. But I'll wait until the time's right. I won't force it, just like we did everything else, one day at a time until the end comes naturally. He rode back as the sun set, painting everything gold. That night he had dinner with Grace and her family, played with the great-grandchildren, and went to bed content. He didn't wake up. Grace found him in the morning, lying peacefully in the bed he'd shared with Vivian for so many years. The doctor said his heart had simply stopped, worn out after too many years of work and worry, and finally, grief. They buried him beside Vivian on the hillside, the 2 graves side by side looking out over the ranch they'd built together. The funeral was even larger than hers had been, people traveling from across the West to pay respects to a man who'd treated everyone fairly, loved deeply, and left the world better than he'd found it. Tom gave the eulogy this time. My father taught me that real strength isn't about never being afraid. It's about being terrified and doing the right thing anyway. He was scared when he sent for a mail-order bride. Scared when Ma was so damaged she couldn't stand to be touched. Scared when Grace was born and when I was born, and probably every day after that something would happen to us. But he never let that fear stop him from loving us with everything he had. He looked out at the assembled crowd. Together, my parents built something that's going to last for generations. Not just this ranch, though it's thriving. Not just the training methods Ma developed, though they've changed how people work with horses across the country. They built a family based on the idea that broken things deserve patience and love and time to heal. That trauma doesn't have to define you. That taking a chance on someone, even when it's scary, can lead to something extraordinary. After the funeral, Grace stood between her parents' graves with little Vivi beside her. They got their happy ending, Vivi said quietly. They did. And they earned every bit of it. Grace put her arm around her granddaughter. That's the thing about love stories. The good ones aren't about everything being perfect. They're about 2 imperfect people choosing each other over and over, working through the hard parts, building something that lasts. Do you think they're together now, wherever they are? Grace smiled. I think Pa waited at that grave for a year and a half, just so he could tell Ma in person how proud he was of her legacy. And I think she forgave him for hovering, because that's what you do when you love someone. They stood there a while longer, then walked back down the hill toward the ranch house. Behind them, the sun set over the valley, painting the same hill's gold that had witnessed two broken people find each other and build something whole. The ranch continued for another 3 generations before finally being sold to a conservation group that turned it into a historic site. But the real legacy lived on in the descendants scattered across the West, in the training methods still taught at equine schools, in the book that was eventually reprinted as a classic text. Most of all, it lived on in the story people told about the mail-order bride from Boston who arrived terrified and broken, and the lonely rancher who gave her space to heal, about how patience and partnership could turn a failing ranch into a thriving legacy, about how love, real love, wasn't about grand gestures but about showing up every day and choosing each other even when it was hard, about how broken things, given the right conditions, could not only heal but become stronger than they'd ever been before. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth passing down to anyone who'd ever felt too damaged to try again. Because if Vivian Hale could step off that stagecoach with bruises hidden under her sleeves and terror in her eyes, and still build a life worth living, then maybe anyone could. That was the real lesson, the one that outlasted everything else. Hope is always possible, even in the darkest moments. Healing takes time, but it's worth the wait. And love, patient and persistent and honest, can accomplish what force never could. The sun set on that hillside every evening after Elias and Vivian were laid to rest, painting everything gold. And if you listen carefully on quiet nights, you might hear the sound of horses moving through the grass, breathing peacefully, free from fear at last.